Chapter 2674. Chu Ho frowned and smiled. Xianxia, I still have to thank you. You coming to my house has added a lot of fun to this originally lonely house. Xiao Bao likes you a lot. With you around, he won't be so lonely. And because of my work, I can't accompany him all the time. With you around, I can be at ease. Chu Ho, haven't you ever thought of trying to find those lost memories? Meng Xianxia finally mustered up the courage to ask. Your identity, your past, your family, and Xiao Bao's biological father. Chu Ho's hands paused for a few seconds. She suddenly looked up and looked at her deeply. Her lips suddenly curved. Of course I've thought about it. I was thinking that when I had enough savings, would go out into the outside world and take a look. Maybe it would be able to jog my memories. When the time comes, why don't we go together? Okay. Meng Xianxia smiled knowingly. Chu Ho sent her to the county's maternity and child health hospital. After a series of checkups, the doctor said that Meng Xianxia was exhausted and overworked. In addition, she sat for a long time and did not have enough nutrition. Therefore, there were signs of a miscarriage. After receiving a pregnancy-stabilizing injection, the doctor repeatedly reminded her not to overwork herself and to have regular checkups. Otherwise, she could easily have a miscarriage. Meng Xianxia was frightened when she heard this. When she thought about how she had almost lost the child in her womb because of carelessness, she could not help but feel a lingering fear. The doctor could not help but ask, "Where's the child's father?" Meng Xianxia's lips twitched, but she did not say anything in the end. The doctor saw that she seemed to be avoiding something and saw the complicated look in her eyes. He knew that this was probably a sensitive topic, so he did not pursue it further. On the way home, Chu Ho passed by a fruit stall. She paused and immediately stopped. Meng Xianxia was surprised when she saw her walk to the fruit stall and pick some fruits. The fruits in the county are cheaper. There are very few fruits for sale in the village, and even if there are, they are expensive. Why don't we pick a few fruits to eat at home? As Chu Ho spoke, he suddenly asked, "Well, I remember now. When I was pregnant with Xiao Bao, I especially liked to eat sour food. In the end, I couldn't find any sour food even after searching for half the night. So, why don't I prepare some sour plums for you, in case you suddenly want to eat something sour but can't find it?" "I don't really want to eat something sour," Meng Xianxia said. This time, it was Chu Ho's turn to be surprised. Isn't it said that pregnant women especially like to eat sour things when they have morning sickness? Like plum blossoms or something like that. Indeed, I've heard people say that, but I really don't have such desires. You're really special. However, just in case, it's better to prepare some. Meng Xianxia asked with a smile, "That's great, we're really fated. When the time comes, I can even learn from you." Seeking scriptures? For example, does it hurt to give birth? I've heard that childbirth is especially painful for women. Chu Ho's expression changed, and she said sternly, "Giving birth is indeed very painful. But I'm very painful. I don't know if you are. Did you have a natural birth?" "Yes. The doctor said that my physical fitness is good and suggested that I have a natural birth. He said that natural birth is good for the body and that I can recover quickly. After all, a cesarean section is an operation, and it's very damaging to the vitality." Chapter 2675. If it's a natural birth, you won't be able to give me anesthesia. Meng Xianxia was a little embarrassed. I really can't take pain. A natural birth will only take a short while. Once the cervix opens, it'll only take 1 or 2 hours. 1 or 2 hours. Meng Xianxia was speechless. I heard that some pregnant women only had 1 night in their entire life. In the end, they had a difficult labor and even suffered a knife wound. Those were those who didn't listen to the doctor's advice and insisted on a natural birth. Everyone's physique is different. Some are suitable for natural birth, while others are not. The doctor will always state the risks in advance and give them a preventive shot. Chu Ho picked a few apples, tomatoes, and a bunch of bananas. When Meng Qingxue saw that, she couldn't help but be curious. Chu Ho, I'm actually very curious. Who were you in the past? You're so good at martial arts. You must have been a police officer in the past, right? I don't know. I don't have any impression of that at all. Meng Qingxue snickered. Xiao Bao's biological father must be very handsome. Xiao Bao is so beautiful, but Xiao Bao's eyes don't look like yours. Thinking about it, Xiao Bao's father must be a dragon among men. You're so beautiful and so outstanding. Xiao Bao's father must be very outstanding too. So nosy? Chu Ho frowned. What about you? The child's father must be very handsome too. Meng Qingxue's face stiffened for a moment, then she nodded. Should I not have brought this up? No. Meng Qingxue smiled. It's just that if you didn't mention it, I would have almost forgotten about him. Don't tell me you have amnesia too. Chu Ho got on the motorcycle and passed the helmet to her. He said half jokingly, half seriously, what did you say about forgetting about him? It's just that you've sealed him away in some corner and deliberately didn't want to think about him. Meng Qingxue put on the helmet in a daze, then carefully got on the back seat and hugged her shoulders. However, Chu Ho's voice was heard. Why did you leave him in the first place? You don't mind me asking this, right? We've been together for so long. There are some things that I want to ask you, but I'm afraid to hurt you. But sometimes, the more you try to avoid it, the more you avoid it. Meng Qingxue was stunned for a long time before she sighed. It's impossible for us to be together in the first place. It was just that he had fallen too deeply in love back then and was stubborn in his own way. He naively thought that true love could change everything. But in the end, he was too naive, too pure, to him. Oh. You make it sound as if you've seen through the world of mortals and know all the men in the world like the back of your hand. He started the car and lowered her head with a smile. You know him that well? How do you know that your to him is a joke? Meng Qingxue was silent for a long time, then she suddenly laughed. Actually, I was obsessed with him back then. He was too dazzling. He had an extraordinary family background and handsome looks. At that time, I was still a model who had just debuted. A model? Chu Ho was a little surprised. You're a model? Chu Ho was a little surprised, but he felt that it was only natural. Oh, no wonder. You have such a good figure and good looks. Chapter 2676. My family didn't have much money, and my parents didn't care much about me. They left me to my own devices. I didn't have much ability in my studies, so I dropped out of school early. So, I started working at a young age, washing dishes and serving dishes for others. Once, I met a man who claimed to be a talent scout. He said that my looks were a sign and asked me if I was interested in signing with a modeling agency. I saw that the treatment was good, so I agreed. But when I stepped into the industry, I wasn't used to it. My impression of a model should be one that walks on the international runway. But, the model that signed with that modeling agency, in my opinion, looks like a high-class escort. Plus, they all have clearly marked prices. Chu Ho was speechless. Clearly priced? Yes. For example, how much would it cost to have a meal, sleep with, or play with? Those who were good-looking and had good conditions would be chosen by the big boss. As for those who were just passable, the modeling agency would spend money to arrange for them to have plastic surgery. In my opinion, wasn't this a disguised form of receiving customers? What about you? Chu Ho asked, did you run away? I didn't dare. Meng Qingxue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I signed a contract with them in a moment of folly. If I had just run away, I would have faced a sky-high penalty. Moreover, the modeling agency is controlled by the mafia. There was once a girl who was 2 years older than me who ran away from the agency and violated the contract. In the end, she was caught by the mafia. I heard that she was crippled and her arms and legs were broken. Chu Ho couldn't help but feel indignant when he heard this. Was there such a thing? Yes. People's hearts are sinister. I didn't know any better, but then I met him at a meal. Yes, to be honest, when I first saw him, he was handsome, tall, and had a good figure. He was better looking than many celebrities in the entertainment industry. I took a second look at him, and he noticed me too. After that, we got together. And then? At that time, I didn't know who he was. I only knew that he was very capable. He knew that I had a financial dispute with the agency. With just a phone call, he got me out of the agency's control. At that time, I admired him. He was so amazing, like a hero. Perhaps at that time, I was hopelessly in love with him. Later on, I found out about his identity. I originally thought that he was a rich second-generation heir. At that time, he also pursued me very passionately. I agreed and became his girlfriend. I wholeheartedly wanted to be with him for the rest of my life. At that time, she had read too many romance novels and thought that all love in the world was the same. I love him, and he will love me. It's that simple. We can be a couple for life. But... Chapter 2677. Chu Ho asked curiously, "How did you find out?" Meng Qingxue said sadly, "One day, a woman came to look for me. When I opened the door, she gave me a slap and called me a vixen. Gosh, I was totally baffled at that time. What vixen? I'm so confused. What's there to miss about a man like him?" Chu Ho was furious. After that incident, I was very sad too. I had an argument with him for the first time. I cried and threw a tantrum, hoping that he would give me a reasonable explanation. But he said that what he did was what he did, and there was no need for an explanation. He said that other than me, he had many other women. But most of them only lasted for one night, and then we parted ways. Because of his family background, he didn't have a deep affection for women. To him, women were just tools for his biological needs. The reason why I could stay by his side for so long was because I was obedient. Secondly, it was because he had some feelings for you and me. But even if he had feelings for me, if I threw a tantrum, he would be annoyed. Chu Ho actually felt a tinge of despair and heartache from her calm and composed tone. A man like that should leave as soon as possible. Yeah, I used to convince myself that too. Meng Qingxue suddenly laughed mockingly. But I was so naive that I wanted to change him. Because I could feel that he loved me. Maybe there would be a day when he would give up on those luxuries and stay by my side. You could feel that he loved you? Yeah. For example? Many details. For example, when I was sick, he would stay by my side. When I was in a bad mood, he would hug me in his arms and coax me like he was coaxing a child. Maybe it's because I never had the warmth of a family in my childhood, and no one had ever doted on me like he did. I thought that this was love, right? He is the person who has treated me the best in my life. Chu Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You were fooled by that little trick? Qingxue, you're still too naive. Meng Qingxue's lips trembled for a while, and then she said innocently, because, really, no one has ever treated me as gently as he did. How could that be? Do your parents not care about you at all? Well, because I'm not my father's biological daughter. What? Chu Ho was shocked. Meng Qingxue said truthfully, I heard it from my brother. My younger brother said that I wasn't from this family and that I wasn't his biological child. When I was 3 years old, my father took me to the hospital for a DNA test and it was confirmed that I wasn't his biological child. It turns out that when my mother married him, she was already pregnant. My father has been neglecting me since I was young. After I had a younger brother, he threw me to my hometown and didn't care about me anymore. As for my mother, she more or less had to consider my father's feelings. After all, for an outsider like me, my father was already being lenient by not throwing me away. My whole family sees me as a disgrace, so. Chu Ho was a little helpless. This isn't your fault alone. So, when he treated me so well, I fell into a whirlpool and lost all rationality. Meng Qingxue laughed at herself. Isn't it funny? No, I just feel a little sorry for you. Chapter 2678. So, you plan to change him? What happened in the end? Later, I found out about his identity. His background was extraordinary, and his family was one of the most prestigious families in the capital. My original wish of marrying him and having children with him completely became an extravagant hope. At that time, I thought that it was probably impossible for me to be with him forever. But even so, I still foolishly stayed by his side. Every day, I hypnotized myself and lied to myself, but I was just greedy for the warmth of his embrace. I also thought of leaving him freely, but in such a big city, every corner was filled with memories of him. Leaving him, I always felt that my life was incomplete. There were a few times when I packed my luggage, but in the end, I couldn't help but sneak back. Later, I found out that I was pregnant. I was both happy and scared. I was happy that this child was his flesh and blood. I always felt that my dream was close to half. I fantasized that he would acknowledge this child, marry me, and start a family. But what's more frightening is that I'm afraid his family will reject me. He knew and wanted you to abort the child? No, Meng Qingxue paused and said sadly, he said that the child could be born, and he would acknowledge this child, but he would never marry me. He said that he would buy me a villa, hire a nanny for me, give me a sky-high living allowance, and take on the responsibility of a father. But, it's impossible for us to get married. He could give me everything, but he couldn't give me a status. You're the best, Chu Ho commented coldly. Meng Qingxue said unwillingly, but, I want a status. No matter if I'm poor or rich, I want to be his wife. I don't want those villas, I don't want alimony, I just want to be with him. You're so silly. I also think that I'm too silly. If that's the case, why did you leave him? Because, Meng Qingxue was silent for a long time before she slowly said, that's because I wanted to lay my cards on the table with him that night. If he didn't want me, I would have hardened my heart and forced myself to leave him and this city. But I made many calls, and in the end, a woman answered. She said that he was already asleep and tired. At that time, my heart was completely cold and hurt. I was in despair. She was clearly provoking me. I'm also tired, so I want to make a clean break with him. Before I left, I sent him a text message, telling him that I would abort the child and asking him not to look for me. I don't think he'll look for me, right? When I left, I only took some money and some personal belongings. I returned everything to him and left without hesitation. Why are you leaving? Chu Ho was displeased. Meng Qingxue was stunned. You left because of a woman's provocation? Chu Ho suddenly burst into laughter. Then why have you persisted for so long? He had persisted like an idiot for so long. Was he going to leave just because of this? Then wouldn't everything you've done before become a complete joke? Yes, you are very carefree, but when you should be carefree, you shouldn't be carefree. When you shouldn't be carefree, leaving just like that will only let others get what they want. Look, he chased you away so easily. He must be so proud of himself that he'll wake up laughing in his dreams. Chapter 2679. Chu Ho said, Qingxue, I really can't figure it out. You shouldn't have left him. Since you've never been a carefree woman, forcing yourself to be carefree will only backfire. Perhaps it's because I'm headstrong and stubborn. If I were you, I wouldn't have been tempted from the start. I wouldn't have fallen for him. I would have left decisively before I fell too deeply. However, once I fell too deeply, I would have snatched him back no matter how many women he had. Whether he had a status or not, I want his body and mind to be mine. There's no room for other women. Since you've persisted for so long, be it foolishness or naivety, why didn't you persevere until the end? Meng Qingxue bit her lip hard as her eyes suddenly welled up with tears. But there's no hope between us. Since you can't get happiness, you shouldn't let him have his way. If he can turn your life upside down, then you can also turn his life upside down. Anyway, it's just torturing each other. It's good to be tied down for the rest of your life. Meng Qingxue was stunned for a moment. She thought that Chu Ho would persuade her to leave that man and start a new life. She did not expect that she would disagree with her carefree attitude and think that she should not just leave. Chu Ho said indignantly, "Yes, you seem very carefree when you leave just like that, but from the beginning to the end, you've never really let him go. There's a name in your heart that you can't erase. Such a name will accompany you for the rest of your life. Is that really carefree? To me, it's either completely forgetting or being entangled for the rest of my life. But can you really forget him completely? You see, I just mentioned him by accident, and your face immediately changed. It's impossible for you to let go of him, and you can't let go of this obsession. You're just lying to yourself. Why bother? If it were me, I would definitely snatch him back at all costs." Meng Qingxue was stunned. She furrowed her brows. Indeed, as Chu Ho said, she could not let go of that man. Mu Yancheng was a name that was deeply engraved in her heart and occupied the best moments of her life. She loved him. Even though he wasn't a perfect man and had many imperfections, she was still obsessed with him as if she was possessed. Then, Meng Qingxue suddenly asked, "Then, if you meet Xiao Bao's biological father one day, maybe he was the man you loved deeply, but at that time, if he already had another woman, or even a wife, would you do the same? Snatch him back? This is different in nature." "How is this different?" Chu Ho said, "Even if that day comes, it will depend on whether I like him or not. If I didn't have any feelings for him, why would I snatch him back? If I love him, but he forgets me and has a family of his own, then I cannot destroy it. But you're different. He doesn't belong to anyone, so you don't have to worry about ethics." Meng Qingxue nodded. "I understand. I hope you really understand. A person's life is very short. If you don't have the courage to fight for what you like and want, then wouldn't you have lived in vain? Chu Ho, you're really carefree." Chapter 2680. After that, Meng Qingxue stopped working in the workshop. Under Chu Ho's persuasion, the two of them reached a consensus. Chu Ho was responsible for making money, and Meng Qingxue was responsible for taking care of the baby. During this period, all expenses would be borne by Chu Ho. When the baby was over the breastfeeding period, Meng Qingxue would then consider her future plans. Although the workshop was not as tiring as working in a factory, in fact, the doctor also said that it was not good for a pregnant woman to sit for too long. In addition, she did not take enough vitamins and nutrition. If this continued, she would be anemic. Chu Ho patted his chest and promised her that he would take good care of her and the baby in her belly. She had a good physique, so she would not be too tired if she took on another part-time job. Because her work in the police station was not part of the establishment, her working hours were very regular. She did not need to rush to duty in case of an emergency like the other police officers. Therefore, she took on another part-time job, which was to drain water and electricity at the construction site in town. Although Yen City was a relatively backward town, it was not a remote village. The government was also vigorously developing Yen City's economy, so many construction sites needed manpower. Draining water and electricity was a technical job, and Chu Ho seemed to know the trick. He learned it quickly and could earn a few thousand yuan a month to supplement the family. Meng Qingxue half-jokingly said that Chu Ho was like a man who was responsible for making money to support the family, while she was like a full-time housewife. Chu Ho just smiled knowingly. When Meng Qingxue was taking care of the baby at home, she planted extra flowers and cleaned the house. When she was energetic, she would accompany Xiao Bao to fly kites in the fields. She was very comfortable. She worked in the workshop for a long time, so she made friends with many peasant women in the village. These simple peasant women pitied her and would occasionally bring some vegetables and fruits to visit. Meng Qingxue was nimble with her hands, and in addition, she was very vain. Therefore, she gave these peasant women some beautiful hairstyles. The peasant women in the village had never seen such a novel hairstyle and were very vain. Therefore, they came even more diligently. When they were free, they would bring the rice and vegetables they planted to visit. Every month, Chu Ho would bring her to the county's hospital for a prenatal checkup. Although Chu Ho acted like a man, he was actually very meticulous and took good care of her. Meng Qingxue sometimes thought that she was really lucky to have met Chu Ho. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Although Chu Ho had been paying attention, there were some things that could not be hidden. On this day, Mu Yancheng was trying on a wedding gown with Song Enya when a call came in. When she saw the number on the screen, her expression turned solemn. She walked to a corner with the phone in her hand and picked it up. She went straight to the point. "Have you found her?" Previously, when she found out that Mu Yancheng was still secretly looking for Meng Qingxue's whereabouts, she became more vigilant and secretly sent people to search for Meng Qingxue's whereabouts. She wanted to find Meng Qingxue's whereabouts before Mu Yancheng did and kill the child in the latter's womb before the latter did. She mobilized all the manpower that she could. In the past, the Mu group was all-powerful and had a wide network of connections. However, these resources were all under Mu Yaja's control. Chapter 2681. If it were Mu Yaja looking for someone, he would be able to find a detailed trace within half a month at most. This was due to Mu Yancheng's carelessness. Song Enya was one step ahead of him and found out about Meng Qingxue's whereabouts. The person on the other end of the phone lowered his voice and said, "Miss Song, according to your instructions, we've done a carpet search and have found her exact whereabouts. This woman has escaped to a very remote county and is living in an unknown village. We followed her for 2 to 3 days and found her going in and out of a maternal and child health hospital in the county with a woman. We then found the doctor who did her prenatal checkup and bribed him with some money. We found out that the child in her stomach is already 13 weeks old. It seems that woman wants to give birth to the child secretly." Song Enya clenched her fists when she heard this. Just as she was about to say something, someone knocked on the door. "Song Enya." It was Mu Yancheng's voice. "Which wedding gown have you chosen? I have a meeting at the company later, so I have to leave now." Song Enya was stunned and immediately said in a deep voice, "That's all for now. I'll contact you later." With that, she hurriedly hung up the phone and put it into her handbag. When she opened the door, she saw Mu Yancheng's impatient face. She was instantly displeased. "What's wrong? You're losing your patience already? I haven't finished trying them on yet. How can I make a decision? Wedding gowns come in the same style. In my opinion, there's no difference." Song Enya walked out of the fitting room and sized him up with furrowed brows. She thought about how this man had been a little absent-minded even though he had agreed to their marriage on the surface and had been preparing for it for so long. He was probably still thinking about that woman. Otherwise, why would he still not give up and continue to search for that woman's whereabouts? That woman was pregnant with his child. She was also pregnant with his child, but Song Enya could clearly feel that his focus was very biased. After all, the child in her stomach came about through other means, while the child in Meng Qingxue's stomach was planted by that man himself. In terms of feelings, he still cared more about that child. This was something she absolutely could not tolerate. Just think about it. They were not married yet, and he was already so cold to her. What about after they got married? What if that woman successfully gave birth to a boy? At that time, that woman suddenly came to her senses and brought the child back to him for an explanation? This man would inevitably be blinded for a moment. Then, her position in the Mu family could be said to be in jeopardy. She had put in a lot of effort and finally climbed to this step. She definitely couldn't let that woman have her way. That child must not be allowed to live. At the thought of this, Song Enya curled her lips coldly, but a coquettish look quickly appeared on her face. Yancheng, why do you always give me this look? We're not even married yet, but you're already so impatient with me. You don't even want to accompany me to try on the wedding dress. Yancheng, I've thought about it. Since we're getting married, can't we just be together? Mu Yancheng furrowed his brows. He was rather surprised by her sudden change in attitude. Chapter 2682. Sometimes, she would even throw a tantrum at him, intentionally or unintentionally. She probably felt that it was not good for the two of them to always be at each other's throats. She was going to marry into the Mu family eventually, so she had to do something about their relationship. It would be inappropriate for them to be at each other's throats after marriage. Hence, Song Enya seemed to be trying very hard to please him recently. She had also made concessions and compromises in many areas. Mu Yancheng's expression softened a little. He did not rush her again but turned around and returned to the sofa. Song Enya watched his back as the corners of her lips curled up coldly. She then chose a wedding gown and went into the fitting room to try it on. She then walked out and asked him, "What do you think of this one?" Mu Yancheng finally looked at her in the eye. He had promised to accompany her to try on the wedding gown. After all, it would be inappropriate for a bride-to-be to try on a wedding gown alone if word got out. As her fiancé, it was his duty to accompany her to try on the wedding gown. Hence, he took the time to come. However, the moment he sat down, he picked up an entertainment magazine from the bookshelf and started reading it. He allowed Song Enya to do what she wanted without asking for his opinion. The store manager introduced from the side, "This mermaid wedding gown suits your figure better. Miss Song, you have a good figure and are exquisite. This gown suits you very well." Mu Yancheng could not help but take another look. Seeing that he was sizing her up, Song Enya cooperated and twirled in a circle. She smiled slightly, looking like a shy and blissful bride-to-be. His gaze could not help but turn misty. His thoughts were running wild. He suddenly recalled a long time ago when he accompanied Meng Qingxue to the mall to pick out a dress. At that time, Meng Qingxue did not know who he was. Meng Qingxue loved to dress up, but she rarely asked him to accompany her to the mall. Firstly, he did not have much free time. Secondly, she could not bear to spend money. After all, she did not have a job and had no source of income. She did not have the confidence to spend his money. But that day was her birthday, so he promised to go shopping with her and buy some clothes. He brought her to the counter and personally selected the items for her. Meng Qingxue cautiously glanced at the price tag. When she saw the 5-digit price tag, her heart sank and she could not help but tremble with fear. She sought his opinion. "Yancheng, the clothes here are so expensive. Why don't we go somewhere else to take a look? Most of the clothes in this mall are from international brands. The clothes are not cheap. No matter which store you go to, you will see the same price." Meng Qingxue's expression changed all of a sudden. She seemed to be at a loss. When he saw that, he couldn't help but laugh. Her timid expression actually satisfied his male chauvinism. Thus, he said heroically, "Today is your birthday, and you're the main character. Moreover, it's not like I don't have the financial ability to do so. If you like it, you can try it on. If it looks good, you can take it." "So generous?" Meng Qingxue laughed. "Then I'll pick whatever I want." Okay. Mu Yancheng sat at the side and watched as the little lass excitedly picked out a few sets of clothes and entered the fitting room. When she slowly walked to him in a long rose-red dress, she nervously pinched the hem of her dress and asked tentatively, "How does this look?" Chapter 2683. She had a great figure. After all, she came from the modeling industry. Her legs were slender and beautiful, and she looked good in everything. "Turn around and take a look." Meng Qingxue turned around shyly. Mu Yancheng nodded. "This is it. Get the staff to pack it up." But this dress costs more than 90,000 yuan. When she first saw the price tag, she rubbed her eyes repeatedly and instantly lost her confidence. If her monthly salary was 6,000 yuan, she would have to starve for more than a year before she could afford this dress. "This is it." Mu Yancheng was full of pride. Following that, she swiped her card and packed it up. The whole process was smooth. When the staff respectfully handed the packed dress to her, Meng Qingxue had a suspicious look on her face. Looking at his expression, it seemed that something was amiss. He did not feel any pain at all. He did not look like he had paid tens of thousands of yuan at all. She silently cursed in her heart. A dress costs tens of thousands. Can't this make you frown? However, at that time, Meng Qingxue did not know that this amount of money was not even worth mentioning to Mu Yancheng. "Here. Your birthday present." He handed the dress to her with a gentle look in his eyes. Meng Qingxue took the bag and felt a little giddy. She was even a little in disbelief. She hugged him excitedly like a happy child. Her face could not hide the joy of joy. "Thank you." She kissed his cheek. Her face was flushed red with contentment and happiness. That satisfied look in her eyes had become an unforgettable memory for him. At that time, he realized that happiness could be bought with money. "How is it, Yancheng?" Song Enya said with some resentment. "You've been staring at me in a daze for a long time. Do I look good?" Mu Yancheng immediately came back to his senses. He retracted his gaze awkwardly and nodded. "Yes. Not bad." "Not bad" means that it's a so-so. "Then, I'll pick another one." Song Enya busied herself with picking out the gowns again, but Mu Yancheng's attention did not return to her. Throughout the whole process, the two of them had different thoughts, each with their own thoughts. Upon reaching home, Song Enya could not be bothered to show off the wedding gown she had chosen to Jiang Qimeng. She hurried upstairs to her room and dialed the number she had hung up in a hurry earlier. As soon as the call connected, she asked anxiously, "Are you sure you have the woman's exact whereabouts?" Meng Qingxue, 19 years old, 13 weeks pregnant, currently in Yen City, Black Dragon Pool Village. Yen City? It's a very remote city, and the economy is relatively backward. We had to go through a lot of trouble to find this place. Yen City is very far from the capital. She must have thought of secretly giving birth to the child in a remote town. Song Enya muttered the name a few times in her mind and was shocked. Yen City, Yancheng, she didn't know if Meng Qingxue did it on purpose or not. Did she not give up on this man? You said that she went to the hospital for a prenatal checkup with another woman? What's that woman's identity? Well, we did check on that woman's identity, but we only know that she works at the police station. We couldn't find out anything about her relationship with Meng Qingxue. How could that be? Her information is blank. We couldn't even find her ID number. Chapter 2684. What do you think, Miss Song? Do you want to get rid of that woman? The subordinate asked subtly. Don't kill her. She furrowed her brows. Finding it tricky, she said, don't act rashly. Listen to my instructions. I'll think about how to deal with the child in her stomach. Okay, I'll wait for your instructions. She hung up the phone. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Startled, she trembled and asked, Who is it? Enya, It's me. It was Jiang Qimeng's voice. Only then did she calm down. She walked to the door and opened it. Jiang Qimeng entered the room, only to find that the lights were off. She immediately rebuked, "Why aren't the lights on?" She turned on the lights, only to see a troubled look on her daughter's face. She frowned at once. "Did something happen?" "Mom, there's something that I don't know if I should discuss with you." Hearing this, Jiang Qimeng took it seriously. She sternly helped her to the bed and sat her down. She asked seriously, "I was wondering why you look like you have something on your mind. Tell me about it so that I can give you some advice." "Mom, I found out that Mu Yancheng has a woman. It seems that the two of them are still entangled." When Jiang Qimeng heard this, she said disapprovingly, "Mu Yancheng is young and impetuous. He's a playboy and has many women around him. I've heard before that he's very playful and has had many women. Isn't that normal?" "Mom, this woman is different." "Oh?" Jiang Qimeng's expression turned serious. "How is she different?" "I have a feeling that Mu Yancheng treats this woman differently. This woman is called Meng Qingxue. Of course, she's not in the capital now. The last time I bumped into her, I used reverse psychology to chase her away. I only found out later that she's pregnant with Mu Yancheng's child. Now, this woman has run to an unknown city and seems to want to give birth to the child secretly. Mu Yancheng, on the other hand, is still relentlessly tracking down her whereabouts. I don't know if it will affect my position if he finds this woman." "There's such a thing?" Jiang Qimeng asked. "How long has she been pregnant with the child?" 13 weeks. "So big already?" "It's been almost 4 months." "Mom, if we wait for this woman to give birth to the child, what will happen? I feel that Mu Yancheng's feelings for her aren't ordinary. I know that he has many women around him, but I don't know their names. She's the only one he can't forget. I keep feeling that she's a huge threat to me. We can't afford any mistakes in this matter." "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure. I've personally sent someone to check on her, and I've got a hold of her whereabouts." Song Enya vowed. "Have you grasped her whereabouts?" "Yes." Jiang Qimeng asked nervously, "Then, what about Mu Yancheng? Isn't he also looking for Meng Qingxue?" Chapter 2685. After all, the subordinates of the Muse aren't very obedient to their new boss, so their efficiency won't be high. "What do you plan to do, then?" Jiang Qimeng asked. Song Enya shook her head with a troubled look on her face. She gritted her teeth fiercely, not knowing what to do. I want to get rid of that child. Without the child, I don't think she'll be able to stir up any big waves. I've also thought about it. It shouldn't be difficult for Meng Qingxue to get rid of the child in her womb alone. I suspect that she'll keep the child to prevent miscarriage. When she secretly gives birth to it and grows up, she'll be like that vixen, Unspoken. She'll think that a mother's status will rise because of her child. When that time comes, she'll bring the child back to the capital. The Muse value their bloodline, so how can they not acknowledge it? Although they can't give her any status, it'll be troublesome even if she just enters the Muse as a concubine. We'll see each other all the time. Do I have to fight with such a woman for a husband and scheme against her every day after becoming the young mistress of the Muse? This. Jiang Qimeng was also a little troubled. Song Enya suddenly asked, Mom, why don't you and Dad come up with a plan to kick up a fuss at the Muse? Seeing that my marriage with Mu Yancheng is imminent, we can report this matter to his second uncle. He'll surely be able to make a decision for me, right? We'll have a chance before the child is born. The Muse value their reputation. At most, we'll go to the media. Once it's exposed, the Muse won't sit idly by. We can't do that. Jiang Qimeng rejected this suggestion. Why? Song Enya was puzzled. Won't you be offending the Muse if you do that? Mu Linfeng isn't a pushover. If you anger him, even the Song family won't be able to bear the consequences. Why? Does the Song family deserve to be bullied by the muse? The Songs aren't that easy to bully. I'm his fiancé, but where did that vixen, Meng Qingxue, come from? She's pregnant with his child. Shouldn't he give me an explanation? I'm not even married into the family yet I'm already being bullied like this. It's really unfair. Song Enya said righteously. Jiang Qimeng immediately comforted her. Silly girl, you can't say that. Mu Yancheng had accepted this marriage passively in the first place. Think about it. He didn't even touch you, but you gave birth to a child. The entire Mu family doesn't approve of this marriage. If it weren't for the child in your belly, and the fact that the Mu family is in deep trouble at this time, and the marriage with the Song family can also support the Mu family with many resources. Otherwise, the Mu family would never agree to this marriage. If Mu Yaja were to encounter such a situation, he would definitely force her to abort the child in her womb without a word. He would never allow you to use such means to force him, but Mu Yancheng had just taken office and would not amount to much. He was soft-hearted and could not deny this child. Still, the Muse have a lot of complaints about this marriage. If you continue to bully them, they'll be even more dissatisfied with you. Jiang Qimeng's analysis was clear and logical. It was obvious that she had a deep understanding of the relationship between the Muse and the Songs. Chapter 2686. Why don't we secretly control that woman and force her to abort the child? Without the child, she won't be able to stir up any trouble. Song Enya suggested again. What's that woman's background? I've done a background check. She's just an ordinary commoner whose family members are migrant workers in the capital. She, on the other hand, is also a young model. With such a background, she won't be able to enter the Mu family even if she spends her whole life trying. Song Enya was very smug when she said this. Relying on the Song family's prestige, she felt that she was a notch above Meng Qingxue. We must make a decision on this matter as soon as possible. It won't be good for you if we delay, said Jiang Qimeng. Song Enya nodded solemnly. It's best if we can get rid of the child without anyone knowing. After making up their minds, the mother-daughter pair began to plan. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. At the same time, Mu Yancheng received the news. Chairman Mu, I've found Miss Qingxue's whereabouts. A man's incomparably solemn voice came from the other end. Mu Yancheng got up from the sofa in excitement and walked to the window. He was actually a little agitated by this exciting news. Have you found her? Where is she now? She's in Yen City now. We only found her traces through the internet. Miss Qingxue went to the Women and Children's Health Hospital in Yen County a few days ago for a prenatal checkup. We're still looking for her exact location, but we've already determined the general area. If there's no accident, she should be in Yen City's Black Dragon Pool Village. Yen City, Mu Yancheng's heart skipped a beat. The city's name was actually a homophone to his. That woman, yes. Yen City is a very backward city, so we don't know how she got there. Perhaps to avoid being tracked down, she took many bus trips before finally settling down in Yen City. To hide her tracks, she deliberately avoided planes and trains, which require identification and real name registration. Instead, she took a bus the entire time. D****. Mu Yancheng gripped his phone tightly. To think that he could not find her whereabouts even after searching for different flights and trains. It turned out that in order to hide from him, this woman had chosen to use a car and a bus as a decoy. What was she trying to do? There should be a limit to her willfulness. She left without saying a word, leaving him baffled. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He could not wait to catch that lovable and detestable woman and teach her a lesson. Give me a precise location as soon as possible. Once you have her whereabouts, report to me immediately. Yes, Chairman Mu. Hold on. Mu Yanqing suddenly asked, how's the child in her stomach? I checked her medical records and found that she almost had a miscarriage some time ago. However, the recent prenatal examination report showed that the fetus's indicators were normal. Mu Yanqing's heart skipped a beat. Almost two? What exactly did she go through? Why did she run away from him at all costs? Chapter 2687. Find her. Do whatever it takes to find her and bring her back. But there's one thing I want you to remember. As for the child in her womb, he had to be careful and bring her back unscathed. If anything happens to the child or her, I'll hold you responsible. Yes, sir. However, the person on the other end of the line was a little hesitant. Chairman Mu. His subordinate probed. What should we do if that woman refuses to come back with us? In that case, keep an eye on her, I'll go pick her up myself. Yes, Chairman Mu. We understand what you mean. The subordinate hung up the phone with trepidation. Mu Yanqing threw the phone on the table as his expression darkened. That woman would eventually return to his side. The Song family was also nervously coming up with countermeasures. That night, Jiang Qimeng mentioned this matter to Song Zhenghua. She had intended to discuss this matter with him and see what countermeasures he could come up with, so she did not expect him to take it to heart. However, when Song Zhenghua heard this, he was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. He sat up in bed in shock and asked incredulously, "What? Mu Yanqing has a mistress outside? And she's pregnant with his child?" When I first heard this, I also found it unbelievable. But Enya said that she had already sent someone to investigate this matter. It's absolutely true, there's no way it's a mistake. Jiang Qimeng hurriedly said, feeling a little agitated. Song Zhenghua clenched his fists in anger, feeling that Mu Yanqing was simply unreasonable. That Mu Yanqing is too much of a bully. What does he mean by this? Don't tell me you want my daughter to live like a widow for him? Isn't this a little too harsh? Jiang Qimeng grumbled. Harsh? How is it harsh? Think about it, Enya hasn't married into the family yet, and Mu Yanqing already wants to take in a mistress outside? Even if the Mu family has such a rule, it's a secret rule that can't be brought out in public. No matter what, Enya hasn't married into the family yet, and he's already gotten another woman pregnant. He didn't even take care of it in time and is determined to embarrass the Song family. Compared to Song Enya's feelings, Song Zhenghua cared more about the Song family's reputation. Jiang Qimeng had mixed feelings when she heard that. Zhenghua, how do you think we should handle this matter? Enya said that she wanted to reason with the Mu family and get Mu Linfeng to be the judge, but I said that she was too impulsive. If she angered that old fox, her days in the Mu family would only be more difficult. What are you afraid of? Mu Yanqing, that rascal, is still hoping for more support from the Song family. Song Zhenghua paused for a moment before continuing, he's just been promoted, and his foundation isn't stable yet. How can he take advantage of the situation? Given his character, he would never admit it even if Song Enya was pregnant with his child. It was only because they coveted the Song family's prestige and background that they reluctantly compromised. When this marriage is completed, the Song family will also give him the support he deserves. But at this critical juncture, he made such a mess for me. It's not the Song family who is making trouble for no reason. Jiang Qimeng pursed her lips and wanted to say something, but she didn't say anything in the end. Chapter 2688. Song Zhenghua replied with an which meant that he agreed with her suggestion. The next day, Song Zhenghua invited Old Master Song and Song Enya's uncle, Song Jianjun, over for a grand family meeting. Old Master Song had a pair of sons. One of them was called Song Jianjun. As his name implied, he was born on Army Day, so he was named Jianjun. Song Jianjun was the head of the capital's military and held a high position. Song Yunxi used to serve in the army under his guidance. Unfortunately, Song Yunxi did not live up to expectations, causing this uncle to feel sorry for her for a long time. This was considered a long-awaited family meeting. Old Master Song was getting on in years. Although his body was still strong, his mental strength could no longer keep up with his age. Jiang Qimeng served him well by the side. Old Master Song's face glowed the entire time. It was obvious that he was in high spirits. "Enya, Grandpa has been waiting for you to get married." Old Master Song clearly did not know the origin of this series of events. He only knew that his precious granddaughter was finally getting married, so naturally, he was overjoyed. If he were to know how Song Enya's child came about, he would be driven to his grave. For a moment, Jiang Qimeng and Song Zhenguo looked at each other. They did not know how to bring up the thorny matter of Mu Yancheng and Meng Qingxue. Song Jianjun vaguely sensed that something was amiss and sized them up. Having been in power for so many years, he was already well trained. With just a glance, he could tell what the other party was thinking. Hence, he suddenly said, "Zhenghua, Dad hasn't been feeling well recently. Why don't you ask Qimeng to help him upstairs to rest for a while? We can continue discussing matters." Okay. As brothers, they had a tacit understanding of each other. Song Zhenghua immediately understood his meaning and gave Jiang Qimeng a look at the same time. Jiang Qimeng immediately stood up and coaxed Old Master Song before helping him upstairs. Song Jianjun then asked, "Zhenghua, what happened? You look like you want to say something but are hesitating. It's a rare happy occasion, yet you seem to have a lot of concerns. Is it because Dad is present that you can't say anything?" "Yes." Song Zhenghua nodded solemnly. Following that, he revealed everything that had been troubling him. However, he chose not to reveal his niece's scandal and, instead, chose to keep it a secret. After all, no matter how close their relationship was, they still had to care about face. When Song Jianjun heard this, he immediately frowned. "This matter is indeed troublesome. I know a little about Mu Yancheng. He's not a bad person, but he's a little too unscrupulous when it comes to women. Since he was the one who made Enya pregnant, he should take responsibility. No matter how he used to be or how many women he had, now that he's about to get married, he should cut off all those messy relationships before he gets married." In the Song family, when Song Jianjun was born, he was trained by Old Master Song from a young age. When Song Zhenguo was born, it was already a peaceful era. Therefore, in comparison, Song Jianjun inherited Old Master Song's upright and plain-spoken character and orthodox way of doing things. Song Jianjun's character was absolutely indisputable. As for Song Zhenghua, it was not as if he had never taken a detour in his political career. More or less, he still relied on Song Jianjun to smooth things out. Chapter 2689. At this point, Jiang Qimeng also walked down and returned to her seat. "That's right. Big brother, give us an idea. How should we handle this matter? Why don't we bring this woman back first? We'll discuss the rest later." Song Jianjun's words were immediately met with Song Enya's objection. "Uncle, that won't do." She huffed angrily. "It doesn't matter whether we bring this woman back or not, but the child in her stomach must not be kept. It's a scourge if we keep it. In my opinion, why don't we get rid of the child first? It won't be too late to deal with that woman after that." "Enya? How can you be so ruthless?" Song Jianjun seemed to be extremely surprised. How could she be so vicious at such a young age? Although the child had not been born yet, it was still a small life. Would it not be a sin to kill it just like that? He had been on the throne for so many years, and the number of lives he had taken was not small. However, the majority of them were not innocent. They had all died for a reason. However, with so many lives in his hands, retribution came as he got older. His quality of sleep was not good now. It seemed that there was indeed such a thing as retribution. Therefore, he began to pray to Buddha and began to believe in karma. Therefore, as an experienced person, he advised, Enya, you mustn't be too ruthless. What you're doing is too harmful to your virtue. Getting rid of that child was a sin, a bad karma. You can't bear it. Uncle, you're a Buddhist? Why is this the first time I've heard of it? She laughed. Song Zhenghua reprimanded sternly, Enya, don't be impudent. The Songs are very particular about rules. Oh, Song Jianjun smiled. Enya isn't old enough to be sensible yet. Anyway, this matter can't be rushed. Find that woman first and bring her back. Then, we'll ask the Muse what they have to say. The child in her stomach is innocent and can't be touched. As for the manpower, don't worry, Zhenghua. I'll send a team, and you'll be in charge of dispatching them. However, this matter can't be publicized, understand? Understood, big brother. Your kindness will always be engraved in my heart. Sigh. We're all family, so there's no need for you to say such words. How distant would that make us seem? Song Jianjun smiled. Thus, the matter was settled. Song Enya, however, disagreed. Before the team set off for Yen City, she placed 2 of her subordinates among them and ordered fiercely, I want that child, Meng Qingxue. Learn to be smart. If you can't do it well, don't come to see me. Yes. Understood. These 2 subordinates mixed into the formation and set off in a grandiose manner. She gave the 2 men a detailed address, which was given to her by the person in charge of collecting intelligence. She asked the 2 men to deal with Meng Qingxue in advance before the army arrived. After sneaking into the formation and arriving at Yen City, the 2 of them followed the address and snuck into Black Dragon Pond village before the troops advanced to their destination. That night, Chu Ho had to be on duty in the afternoon. He would only get off work and go home after 10 o'clock at night. If there was an accident and he needed to go out, he might have to go home even later. Chapter 2690. Xiao Bao had long been used to Chu Ho leaving early and returning late. Originally, it was very boring for him to be alone at home. After all, Chu Ho had no identity and no household registration. He didn't even have a birth certificate, let alone be able to go to kindergarten like other children. Although the kindergarten in the village was old and shabby, it still followed the rules. A child like Xiao Bao with no background could not enter the kindergarten at all. Therefore, when Chu Ho went to work, he could only watch TV at home or play with the children in the village. However, the children in the village did not like this fair and tender little fellow. Therefore, this little fellow, who had grown up in the village, was very clean and too delicate, like a child from the city. He was not even willing to play with mud. Needless to say, Xiao Bao was quite a clean freak despite his young age. Children of his age were still playing with mud, but he snorted at it. Therefore, Chu Ho bought him a comic book and a small picture book. When the sun was good, Xiao Bao would move a stool outside, spread it with snow-white A4 paper, and earnestly copy the pictures in the picture book. In just a few months' time, his meticulous brushwork had actually improved to a decent level. Now that there was one more person at home, Meng Qingxue would take him outside to play when she was not at home. The scenery in Yen City was very beautiful. Meng Qingxue often thought that it would be great if this place could be developed into a tourist attraction. The terraced fields, the sea of flowers, the blue sky, and the white clouds, without the smog and pollution of the heavy industrial city, everything was indescribably beautiful. Have you seen a green lake? Have you ever seen a stream so clear that you could see the bottom? It could be seen everywhere. Meng Qingxue also liked to draw when she was young, so occasionally, she would take Xiao Bao to the wild to sketch. Most of the time, she would lie in the field with him and look up at the sky. Auntie Qingxue, do you think the name Mom gave me, Xiao Bao Chu, sounds good? A lot of people say that my name is tacky. Meng Qingxue couldn't help but laugh. Xiao Bao, you're so cute. This means that you're an amazing treasure in your mother's heart. Then, Chu Xiaobao turned over and laid down beside her. He rested his cheeks on his hands and tilted his head curiously. Auntie Qingxue gave birth to Xiaobao baby. What do you want to name Xiaobao baby? I haven't decided yet. I don't even know if the baby is a boy or a girl. Chu Xiaobao suddenly giggled, if only it were a girl. Huh? Meng Qingxue was a little surprised. Why do you say that? Mom said that if Aunt Qingxue gives birth to a girl, she'll be Xiaobao's wife. Meng Qingxue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiaobao, do you know what a wife means? Of course. Xiaobao said proudly, Mom said that a wife means a girl who will be with me forever and accompany me for the rest of my life. Pfft. Meng Qingxue was amused by him. Is that how your mom explained it to you? Yeah. Isn't that what it means? Actually, she's not wrong. Meng Qingxue couldn't help but pat his little head. Suddenly, she asked, then, Xiaobao, Auntie wants to ask you a question too. Do you know what a husband means? Chapter 2691. Hey! When the boy grows up, he'll meet the girl he likes. The two of them like each other and will be together forever. After they get married, the boy will call the girl wife, and the girl will call the boy husband. They'll give birth to cute Xiaobao babies and their lives will continue. Then, does Auntie Qingxue have a husband? Meng Qingxue was stunned and shook her head. Then Auntie Qingxue has Xiaobao babies too. What's even stranger is that Mommy doesn't have a husband either, but Mommy has me too. Xiaobao. Meng Qingxue suddenly asked, do you want to find your father? Xiaobao raised his handsome eyebrows and suddenly smiled. Of course. Xiaobao has always wanted a father. When Xiaobao grows up, I'll go find him. Meng Qingxue smiled, but her heart was heavy. That night, Chu Ho was on duty. After Meng Qingxue bathed Xiaobao, the two of them lay on the bed and watched TV. Children were full of energy, but that was based on the fact that they didn't go out to play during the day. With Meng Qingxue around, Xiaobao's energy had long been exhausted. He fell asleep at around 8:00. Seeing that he had fallen asleep, Meng Qingxue also felt sleepy. Ever since she got pregnant, she had become a little sleepy. She turned off the TV, hugged Xiaobao, and closed her eyes. That night, she didn't sleep well. She was always half asleep and couldn't sleep well. In the middle of the night, it started drizzling. The raindrops weren't heavy, but the wind was exceptionally strong. It blew against the windows, making loud sounds. Meng Qingxue was in a daze when she was awakened by the sound of the windows. She opened her eyes and saw that it was raining outside. Before she went to sleep, she forgot to lock the windows. She was worried that Xiaobao would wake up, so she carefully got out of bed, walked to the window, and closed it. The room fell silent all of a sudden. However, in this strange silence, she vaguely heard the strange sound of the wooden floor. Meng Qingxue's heart skipped a beat. She stopped abruptly and looked down. The room was made of composite flooring. When she stepped on it, there was a strange sound. She calmed her nervous heartbeat. Why was she scaring herself in the middle of the night? Meng Qingxue let out a breath of cold air and returned to the bed. However, she suddenly heard the strange sound of the wooden floor creaking again. She suddenly widened her eyes and looked at the empty ceiling. This time, she knew very well that this strange sound did not come from the wooden floor. This time, she could clearly sense that the sound came from the corridor. The corridor was also paved with composite flooring. Every time someone went upstairs, there would be a strange creaking sound. Could it be that Chu Ho had returned? Impossible. She identified the sound and tiptoed carefully. She was so careful that she made a bigger sound. If Chu Ho had returned, he definitely wouldn't have woken them up. Chu Ho's movements were extremely light. He walked as if he was flying. It was impossible for him to make such a big sound. It definitely wasn't Chu Ho. Chapter 2692. She immediately reached out to lock the door, but in a flash, the person outside the door turned the doorknob. Following that, with an extremely brutal force, the man kicked the door open and barged into the room. Meng Qingxue was caught off guard and fell backward to the ground. In order to protect the child in her stomach, she deliberately used her hands to support herself, but she still fell hard. Ugh, Meng Qingxue frowned in pain. With a click, the lights were turned on, and the entire room was lit up. She looked up and saw two men in black with masks over their faces. As soon as they walked in, they saw her fall to the ground. They immediately reacted. They must have heard the sound of their footsteps and woke her up. This woman is quite alert. The man sneered as he took out a photo from his clothes and compared it with Meng Qingxue's appearance. You're Meng Qingxue, aren't you? Meng Qingxue gritted her teeth. She thought that these two men were sent by Mu Yancheng. Her face turned extremely gloomy and she denied it without thinking. I'm not. You're not. The man threw the photo at her. You look exactly the same, and you're still quibbling with me? Hearing their vulgar words, Meng Qingxue frowned again as her heart pounded wildly. She did not know what time it was, nor did she know when Chu Ho would be back. She was very clear in her heart that with her current pregnancy and lack of strength, she was definitely not a match for these two burly men. She could only think of ways to stall for time. You. Who are you? Meng Qingxue mustered up her courage to ask. The two men looked at each other and then at her again. Their gazes were vicious. You don't have to ask anything. Hand over the child obediently. Meng Qingxue was stunned. Hand over the child? She was stunned for a moment, not understanding what they meant. Here, he had made a laughable mistake. The two men left in a hurry, and Song Enya gave them instructions too hastily. She only said that she wanted a child, but she did not specify in detail whether it was the one she was pregnant with or a lively child. The two men thought that their master wanted a child of about 4 or 5 years old. Hence, they did not think much of it. Furthermore, Meng Qingxue was only 3 months pregnant. Her lower abdomen was not very obvious, and she had a good figure. It was impossible to tell that she was pregnant. Naturally, they did not think too much about it. Don't play dumb. Where's the child? Hand the child over obediently and save you from suffering. Meng Qingxue bit her lower lip hard when she suddenly realized something. Her heartbeat quickened. Oh no, Chu Xiaobao! The noise of the two men startled the child sleeping soundly on the bed. Xiaobao was woken up by the argument. He opened his sleepy eyes and rubbed them with his hand. He was still sleepy. When he saw that the lights were on, he was startled and immediately closed his eyes. He called out sleepily, Auntie Qingxue. His childish voice instantly attracted the attention of the two men. Chapter 2693. Big brother, don't tell me that the child master wants is this child? A man muttered softly. Shut up. Anyway, take the child away first. That person ordered, and his underling reached out a pair of large hands to Xiao Baochu. Xiao Baochu felt a pair of coarse hands touching him, and he opened his eyes in confusion. He heard Meng Qingxue's hoarse voice exploding in his ears. Xiao Bao, run. There are bad people. Ah. Xiao Baochu was instantly startled awake. He opened his eyes, and almost without any reaction, he was grabbed by the collar by the man. He was shocked and frightened, and he started to cry. Let go of me. Let go. Go. The two men exchanged a look, and they understood each other tacitly. When Meng Qingxue saw that they were going to take away Xiao Baochu, she was so shocked that she immediately rushed up and grabbed one of the men's clothes tightly. She was so anxious that tears fell from her eyes. Don't take him away. He's innocent. The child you want is in my stomach. In my stomach. The person you want to take away is me, don't implicate the innocent. I'm the person you're looking for, not this child, and I have nothing to do with this child. I beg you, don't hurt him, okay? Get lost. That man pushed her away, carried the crying child, and hurried down the stairs. Meng Qingxue chased after him without a care. Hearing Xiao Bao's continuous crying, her mind went blank. She didn't even care about the child in her stomach, and she chased after the two men, crying and shouting, "The child you're looking for is in my stomach. Not this child. You've got it wrong. You've got it wrong." She didn't hesitate to sacrifice herself and made the worst decision. Even if she was taken away by this group of people and forced to abort the child, she couldn't implicate the innocent child. However, no one believed what she said. They only thought that she was playing hard to get. The two men kicked open the door. A van with a fake license plate was parked outside. They opened the door and were about to shove Xiao Baochu in when Meng Qingxue rushed up in a panic. She threw herself beside one of the men, and reached out to snatch the child. Xiao Baochu immediately reached out to grab her hand. The man beside her reacted quickly, and grabbed Meng Qingxue's wrist tightly. "I told you to get lost, didn't you hear me?" As he said that, he kicked Meng Qingxue to the ground. With a kick to her knee, Meng Qingxue let out a muffled groan, staggered, and fell to the ground. At this moment, the drizzle was the rain of the rain. The road suddenly became muddy, and Meng Qingxue fell to the ground, covered in mud. Xiao Baochu saw that Meng Qingxue was in such a miserable state, so how could he let it go? The little guy's heart burned with anger. He opened his mouth and bit the shoulder of the man who was holding him. "Ah!" The man screamed and cursed fiercely, "Motherf asterisk cur. You little bastard." As soon as he finished speaking, a slap was thrown. Xiao Baochu was slapped hard in the face. His body tilted, and he fell backward. His head hit the window post hard, and his vision turned black. He actually fainted. Seeing that the child had fainted, the man finally smiled in satisfaction. This way, it finally stopped. That's good. Chapter 2694. Don't hurt him. Please, this child is innocent. His name is Xiao Bao. He's not the child you're looking for. The person you're looking for is me, isn't it? Meng Qingxue pleaded bitterly. However, no one paid any attention to her. The two men closed the door and locked it before getting into the car. One of them sat in the driver's seat while the other sat in the passenger's seat and started the car. Meng Qingxue saw the car slowly start and drive away. She immediately struggled to get up and limped after it. "Xiao Bao! Xiao Bao!" She cried at the top of her lungs, but the car still sped away mercilessly. "Xiao Bao!" She kept chasing after it, but the despair in her heart was expanding infinitely. It was only when the car was far away that Meng Qingxue, panting heavily, staggered a few steps after it, but in the end, her physical strength was exhausted. Her vision blurred, and soon, she fell into a whirlpool of darkness and fainted in the rain. Not far away, the sound of car horns could be heard. It seemed that a large number of cars were driving toward this place. Rows of Nissan cars drove in the direction of the village. Nissan cars. These were all military vehicles. The first car was an Audi A8 with its high-beam headlights on. The driver saw a woman lying on the ground not far away. She was covered in mud and immediately reported, "Chairman Mu, there seems to be a woman lying on the ground in front. Stop the car." "Yes." The car quickly stopped. The row of cars behind them also braked and stopped. The driver got out of the car and opened the back seat door. Mu Yanqing got out and someone immediately held an umbrella for him. He did not intend to come tonight. However, he was still worried that this silly woman would insist on going her own way and not return. Hence, he came personally. Even if she refused to go with him, he would coax her back and trick her back. Mu Yanqing got out of the car. Under the high-beam headlights, he saw a woman lying on the ground. However, just looking at the woman's back made his eyes tremble. He quickly walked up to her and carried her in his arms. Just as he turned this person's face over, Meng Qingshue's pale and muddy face came into view. Qingxue. Mu Yanqing sized her up again, only to see her in her pajamas. She was covered in muddy water from head to toe. What was more alarming was that she was so cold that it made one flustered. Qingxue, Qingxue. What was going on? Why did she faint here for no reason? Didn't she say that she was carefully nurturing the fetus in this unknown village? How did he end up in such a sorry state? Qingxue. Qingxue, Mu Yanqing could not afford to wait any longer. He immediately pulled Meng Qingxue into his arms and hurriedly got into the car while calling her name anxiously. Go to the hospital. Go to the hospital. Mu Yanqing's face never betrayed his panic before. He hugged Meng Qingxue tightly in his arms and caressed her face with heartache. His heart was beating wildly. Qingxue, don't scare me, okay? I'm late, it's my fault, it's my fault. Don't scare me. He had never realized that he was so afraid of losing a person. His assistant at the side cautiously comforted him. Chairman Mu, don't be nervous. We'll send Miss Qingxue to the hospital immediately. Mu Yanqing did not have the time to care about her. He hugged Meng Qingxue tightly and trembled in fear. Chapter 2695. The car sped along at a high speed. The rain gradually became heavier, and bean-sized raindrops pitter-pattered against the car window. Mu Yanqing hugged Meng Qingxue tightly in his arms. At this moment, the person in his arms was already drenched in cold sweat. It hurts, a faint moan sounded. Mu Yanqing looked down in shock, only to see Meng Qingxue squinting her eyes. The flashing lights outside the window flashed across her face, and he could vaguely see the fine beads of cold sweat on her forehead. Where does it hurt? Mu Yanqing's expression suddenly became nervous. It hurts, it hurts. Meng Qingxue regained her consciousness in the darkness and felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. She could not help but touch her lower abdomen. The waves of pain almost exhausted all her willpower. Her back was as stiff as a rock, and her body was so tense that she could not move. Someone seemed to be calling her name by her ear. It was a familiar voice, but she did not want to hear it again. Qingxue. She widened her eyes a little, and her vision gradually became clearer. Mu Yanqing's nervous and anxious face came into view. Qingxue, how are you feeling? You said you're in pain. Where does it hurt? Meng Qingxue, who was in a daze, did not realize who the man in front of her was. She only held her abdomen in pain. My child. Meng Qingxue was still in a daze, but subconsciously, she was still thinking about the flesh and blood in her abdomen. It hurts. Mu Yanqing's heart ached so much that he hugged her tightly, but he could only watch as she curled up in his arms, trembling all over. Qingxue, don't be afraid. With me here, the child will be saved. Qingxue, hang in there. We'll be at the hospital soon. Mu Yanqing caressed her pale face with heartache. Not only will your child be saved, but we'll also have a second child, a third child. Qingxue. Meng Qingxue was in so much pain that she clutched his collar tightly, panting heavily. Mu Yanqing could not help but feel a little anxious. He questioned coldly, when will we reach the hospital? The chauffeur hurriedly changed the direction and reported, Chairman Mu, don't worry. The GPS shows that we're 1 kilometer away. Mu Yanqing gritted his teeth and lowered his head to look at Meng Qingxue, who was as stiff as a rock, in annoyance. The car quickly drove into the hospital. The medical staff rushed over immediately. Mu Yanqing carried Meng Qingxue out of the car. When the doctors saw this, they hurried over to help, but he subconsciously resisted them from touching her and immediately glared at them. Get lost. This man was so hot-tempered. She then looked at the woman in his arms. Her face was pale and covered in cold sweat. She was probably a little irritable because she was overly worried. The doctors couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. However, when they looked at the license plate of the Audi A8 again, the group of people caught a glimpse of rows of Nissan cars with military license plates quickly driving into the hospital. When they looked at the license plate, it was a special license plate of Beijing XXXXX. They knew that the tall men who came out of the car were all dignitaries from Beijing. Oh my God! This is Yen City, such a small city. How did it attract the attention of these dignitaries from the capital? They immediately understood that no matter how impolite this handsome man was, they could not show their impatience on their faces. Otherwise, they would definitely get into trouble if they angered these bigwigs who were not to be trifled with. Chapter 2696. Mu Yanqing personally carried Meng Qingxue to the gurney and looked up anxiously. "Doctor, what are you waiting for? She's screaming in pain. Didn't you hear her? Hurry up and see what's going on." Only after he gave the order did the doctors gather around. "Where is the patient injured?" "When I arrived, she had already fallen to the ground." "Anne." Mu Yanqing continued in a low voice, "She's pregnant." "Are you her family member?" asked the doctor. Mu Yanqing blurted out without thinking, "I'm her man." "Sir, please calm down first. Don't be nervous, we'll send her to the emergency room immediately." With that, the doctor hurriedly pushed the gurney and rushed to the emergency room. Mu Yanqing chased after a few steps, but suddenly realized something. He stopped in his tracks and looked down, only to see a trace of red blood on his right sleeve. "Chairman Mu, you." Seeing him stop, the assistant behind him walked up to him, only to see the shock in his eyes. Following his line of sight, he also saw a smear of red on his sleeve. Mu Yanqing's hands suddenly trembled. How did this happen? He clenched his trembling right hand so tightly that the veins on his wrist popped out. Late at night. The sky in the capital was also gloomy. Song Zhenghua stood by the window. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Suddenly, the phone rang. Jiang Qimeng, who was anxiously waiting on the sofa, jumped up and rushed to the landline to pick up the receiver. "Hello? Madam Song." A nervous voice came from the other end. Jiang Qimeng tried her best to suppress her nervousness and pretended to be calm. "Speak. Madam Song, I'm sorry, it's our fault for not being able to bring that woman back." "What do you mean?" Before Jiang Qimeng could ask further, Song Zhenghua rushed over, snatched the receiver, and questioned coldly, "What's the situation?" "Mr. Song. I'm really sorry, by the time we arrived, the Mu family had already arrived." "What?" Song Zhenghua was stunned. "When we arrived, we saw a row of cars driving out of the village. We looked at the license plates and found that they were all transferred from Jianghu in the capital. We guessed that the Mu family had sent people to take Meng Qingxue away before we did." Song Zhenghua gritted his teeth in anger. "Trash!" Bang! He hung up the phone fiercely and fell heavily on the sofa, looking extremely irritated. Jiang Qimeng immediately asked, "Zhenghua, what's going on? Didn't you bring him back successfully?" "No. This bunch of trash, they were one step too late, the Mu family had already snatched her away." "What?" Jiang Qimeng furrowed her brows anxiously. "Are you sure? Are they from the Mu family? The car's license plate is from Jianghu. Other than Big Brother, only Mu Linfeng has the ability to transfer people from Jianghu in the capital." Jiang Qimeng was vexed. "Aya, what should we do now?" Song Zhenghua flared up. "What can I do? Can you stop nagging beside my ear? My head is going to hurt from your nagging." Chapter 2697. Time felt so long that it felt like time had frozen. Just as she was in a corner, her phone suddenly rang. Almost instinctively, she answered the call and brought it to her ear. "How is it?" "Miss Song, we've brought him here. Where are you? We're on the highway, but due to the long journey, we'll probably reach the capital tomorrow morning. Although the distance between Yen City and the capital was far, it only took a little more than 7 hours via the highway. She immediately said, I'll send you the address right away. I'll wait for you there tomorrow morning. Okay. After hanging up the call, she immediately sent an address over. Alas, she did not know that her instructions were not clear enough. The person brought back by the 2 men she sent out was not the one she wanted. In the car, Xiao Bao slowly woke up. He opened his eyes and gradually regained his clarity, only to see a pitch-black car. Next to him was a car window, through which he saw a flash of darkness. On the highway, the car sped along, its engine roaring. Xiao Bao frowned. The back of his head had been hit, and it was dazzling. He shook his head and tried to move, but he realized that his hands were cuffed behind his back. His mouth was also taped, so he could not make any sound. He was shocked and scared. Isolated and helpless, he did not know where this car was taking him. Are they human traffickers? The village was often visited by human traffickers. At first, he did not know the identity of these strangers who came in and out of the village, but he saw that they were all carrying very small babies in their arms. Some were 1 year old, some were 2 or 3 years old, and they were all crying. According to the children in the village, these were human traffickers who abducted children from the big cities and sold them to remote villages at high prices. Most of them changed hands for 20 to 30,000 yuan. A child from a village in Black Dragon Pool Village was bought from these people for 20,000 yuan. At a young age, he already knew the term human traffickers. Could it be that he had also been abducted? Was he going to be abducted to the ravine and sold? Chu Xiaobao was trembling in fear. Perhaps it was because he was extremely frightened that he forgot to cry for a moment. He stared at the 2 men in the driver's seat and the passenger's seat. His mother had once warned him that if he met bad people, especially criminals, he must not cry loudly when there were no outsiders. Otherwise, he would definitely be treated crudely. When there was an opportunity, such as in a busy city or on the streets, he would ask for help immediately. Chu Xiaobao was a smart child, and a rational child. Although he usually looked innocent and pure, he was able to calm down in this kind of situation. He knew that crying and throwing a tantrum was useless. He would not be saved just because he cried and threw a tantrum. Instead, he would suffer a lot. Chu Xiaobao leaned back in his seat, but his breathing became heavier and heavier. The man in the co-pilot's seat turned around and saw that he was awake but didn't cry. For a moment, he was surprised. If it were any other child of this age, they would have been scared to the point of crying and screaming. However, this child did not even make a sound other than crying pitifully. It was really strange. This child actually doesn't know how to cry. Chapter 2698. Mom, he mumbled fearfully with tears in his eyes. However, Chu Xiaobao would never have expected that this accident would become a turning point in his life. In retrospect, he would be grateful to the 2 men who had taken him away. Of course, this was all in the future. The night deepened. At the police station, a police car was parked at the entrance. The car door opened and Chu Ho got out of the car with a man in handcuffs. He pushed him. Behave yourself. The man seemed to be unconvinced. He was shirtless and had tattoos all over his left and right arms. His hair was dyed in various colors and he looked like a bandit. He cursed, F*CK, UB*TCH. His breath reeked of alcohol. Chu-He frowned and waved her hand to disperse the strong smell of alcohol. She then kicked him in the back again. The man was caught off guard and fell to the ground with a face full of mud. Watch your mouth. The man gritted his teeth and scolded, What? So what if I call you AB*TCH? So what? Chu Ho sneered and walked over. He grabbed the man's hair and slapped him 3 times. Slap, 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 the man was stunned. He was in so much pain that he gritted his teeth. What are you doing? Chu Ho asked, didn't you ask me what I was doing? Is this okay? UB*TCH. The man pretended to scold him again. Chu Ho raised his hand again. The man was instantly terrified and kept quiet. This woman had quite a bit of strength. Those 3 slaps just now had made his head go numb. What a ruthless person. Know your place and don't suffer so much, understand? The moment Chu He mentioned him, she dragged him into the police station. When he reached the door, the police officer on duty looked up and asked, Little Chu, you're still out in the middle of the night? Yeah. Someone reported that a group was gambling. When I rushed over, a few of them slipped away and I only caught this one. We didn't have enough manpower. Thank you for your hard work. Chu Ho raised his hand as a greeting. He escorted her into the police station and locked her in the interrogation room. Just as he was about to record her statement, the police officer on duty with her walked over with her phone in his hand. She usually didn't bring her phone with her when she was on a mission because she was worried that she would be distracted or accidentally drop her phone at the scene. Previously, a colleague received a report that someone was taking drugs in a KTV. When he was on duty, he accidentally left his phone at the scene. It was picked up by another criminal suspect who had not been arrested. Coincidentally, the phone was unlocked. After that, he looked for an opportunity to take revenge and kidnap the colleague's wife. Fortunately, the danger was averted. Little Chu, something seems to have happened to your family. Chu Ho paused in the middle of preparing the documents. He raised his head and frowned. What happened? It's your neighbor who called. He said that something seems to have happened to your house. You should quickly ask for leave and go back to take a look. Chu Ho took the phone and looked at it. It was her neighbor, Song Chao An. She frowned. Her colleague seemed to understand her concerns and patted her shoulder gently. Since something has happened to your house, you should quickly go back and take a look. If anything happens here, I'll take care of it for you. Chapter 2699. What crime did you commit? Gambling. Okay, I got it. Go back quickly. Chu Ho did not delay any further. She did not even have time to change out of her uniform. She took the phone and rushed out of the door. She started the car and dialed Song Chao An's number. The call was quickly connected. Hello? It's me, Chu Ho. Chao An, what happened? Sister Chu, please come back. Something happened at your house. An hour ago, 2 men rushed into your house and seemed to have abducted Xiao Bao. When I walked out of the door, I saw Meng Qingxue running after them. She fainted on the ground. I held an umbrella and was about to rush over to help her up when a few more cars arrived. A few people got out of the cars and took her away. I don't know where they went. Where did the car drive to? It seems to be in the direction of the county. Could she have been sent to the hospital? Chu Ho's facial muscles stiffened. She hung up the phone, put on her helmet, and rushed to the county's hospital. There was only one big hospital in the county. The police station was not very far from the county. When she arrived, she was surprised to see a row of high-end cars parked at the entrance. She was very sensitive. Looking at the license plates, she guessed that they were from the capital. However, the license plates were a little unique. They were white with red lettering and were not ordinary license plates. She instinctively associated these cars with Meng Qingxue. Her heart tightened. She was so anxious that she did not even have the time to lock her car. Hugging her helmet, she rushed into the emergency room. Only 2 rows of lights were on at the entrance of the emergency room. She walked over and was surprised to see a row of men in suits standing at the entrance. Her sixth sense told her that Meng Qingxue had been sent to the emergency room. Chu Ho walked over. When she got close, she was stopped by a few tall and burly men. "Sorry, you're not allowed to come close." Chu Ho looked up and said coldly, "I'm looking for Meng Qingxue." Upon hearing the name Meng Qingxue, the men looked at each other in surprise. Mu Yancheng was sitting on a bench by the entrance, holding his forehead with a troubled look on his face. Suddenly, someone approached him and cautiously reported, "Chairman Mu, there's a woman looking for Meng Qingxue." "Who?" "I'm not sure, but he was wearing a police uniform." Mu Yancheng raised his head and followed the man's line of sight, only to see a woman standing upright a few meters away. She was holding a helmet in her hands with a deep look in her eyes. His pupils couldn't help but shrink. He felt that this woman's face was very familiar, as if he had met her before. "Let her come over." He remembered that his subordinates had investigated this woman before. This woman was probably the one who had helped Qing Shui settle down. Yes. Chu Ho was allowed to pass, and she immediately walked over. She raised her head and saw the light at the door of the emergency room. Emergency treatment in progress. Her heart suddenly clenched. She turned around and asked Mu Yancheng, "Is Qingxue inside?" Mu Yancheng asked warily, "Who are you? Shouldn't you introduce yourself before asking for someone's identity?" Chu Ho replied expressionlessly. The man at the side saw that she was being rude and wanted to step forward. Chu Ho was about to retaliate when Mu Yancheng raised his hand to stop him. "This is none of your business." "Yes, Chairman Mu." He looked up and met Chu Ho's eyes. Suppressing his anger, he suddenly said in a deep voice, "Mu Yancheng." "Oh? That heartless man?" Chapter 2700. "My name is Chu Ho, and I'm Qingxue's good friend." "Good friend?" Mu Yancheng was obviously a little suspicious. "I don't remember her having a good friend named Chu Ho. What do you know about her? What can a man who can't even protect his woman and child know? Be more polite with your words." Chu Ho said indifferently. "I'm already showing you the greatest respect by not punching you the moment I saw you." Mu Yancheng was speechless. Chu Ho had no intention of bickering with him and slowly explained, "I met her more than a month ago. At that time, she had just arrived in Yen City and was unfamiliar with the place. She was harassed and bullied by 2 hooligans. I was in charge of this case. Seeing that she was alone and pregnant, I let her stay at my house to rest and nurse the baby." She was bullied by 2 hooligans? Mu Yancheng caught the main point, and a hint of viciousness flashed across his eyes. "What happened?" "It's very dangerous for a person to stay in a hotel alone in the middle of the night with tens of thousands of yuan in cash on her. I don't know how a pregnant woman like her could end up in such a helpless state." With that, she looked at him meaningfully. Mu Yancheng was once again rendered speechless by her teasing. "Why? Are you feeling guilty? It's good that you know that you're guilty. You don't have a bad conscience." Chu Ho asked again, "How is she now?" Mu Yancheng ignored her. Chu Ho did not have such patience. She had been anxious along the way, and when she saw that he did not respond, she became even angrier. She immediately took a step forward, grabbed him by the collar, and interrogated him. "I'm asking you a question. How is she now?" "Let go." Someone immediately rushed over to her side. She grabbed that person's hand and flung it away. "Get lost. This is none of your business." "Chairman Mu, get lost." Mu Yancheng was also annoyed and reprimanded. The people around him immediately retreated, trembling with fear. Mu Yancheng sucked in a deep breath of cold air and clenched his fists tightly. "By the time I arrived, she was already unconscious on the ground. On the way to the hospital, her condition didn't seem optimistic. The doctor said that I probably can't keep the baby in my womb." "What?" Chu Ho frowned. Her gaze was suddenly attracted by the dried bloodstain on his sleeve. Her heart skipped a beat and her mind went blank. How could this be? It was just a fall, it shouldn't be that serious, right? When she was pregnant, she also fell a few times, but nothing unusual happened. Chu Ho suddenly realized that Meng Qingshue's body was weak to begin with. When she thought of this, she fell onto the bench in a daze. Her gaze was numb. Half an hour later, the door suddenly opened and a doctor in a white coat walked out. Chu Ho raised her head abruptly and was about to rush over when Mu Yancheng walked up to the doctor before her. "Doctor, how is she?" The doctor sized him up. His attitude was still polite, but his tone was calm as if he was used to the vicissitudes of life and death. "Are you asking about the adult or the child in her womb?" "Sir." Chu Ho also walked over anxiously. When she heard the doctor's words, she suddenly had an ominous premonition. Could it be that the child could not be saved? "Sir, are you the husband of the lady inside?" Chapter 2701. Mu Yancheng was stunned for a moment before he regained his senses. As if he had just woken up from a dream, he smiled bitterly. I am. Do you still want that child?" The doctor asked again. "Why do you ask? If you don't want that child, get rid of it as soon as possible while it's still young. If you want it, protect your wife and child well. Don't try to be mysterious." Mu Yancheng could not take it anymore. "No matter what, I have to protect the mother and child. I asked you a question and you haven't answered me yet. How is she? Is she all right?" The doctor sighed. "The situation is still considered good. It's not the worst outcome. She was sent to the hospital in time and the child was saved. However, what happens next may depend on the situation. This lady's body is weak. Although the child in her stomach is saved for the time being, if her body is not taken care of properly, the child will eventually be miscarried. I found out that there were signs of miscarriage before this. This is not a good sign." Signs of miscarriage, that's right. There was such information in the report that his subordinate had given him. She seemed to have almost suffered a miscarriage. Chu Ho asked nervously, "In other words, the mother and child are safe, right?" The doctor nodded. "This is only a temporary situation. We can't guarantee that this fetus can be saved. If the later care can't keep up, I'm afraid it's a little dangerous." "Has she regained consciousness now?" "Yes, she has regained consciousness." "Help her with the procedures immediately and transfer her to the ward." Mu Yancheng was about to turn around when Chu Ho immediately stopped him and said slowly, "Go in and take a look at her first. You're not familiar with this place, but I'm more familiar with it. I'll help her with the procedures." "Okay." Mu Yancheng did not hesitate and immediately went into the emergency room. On the hospital bed, Meng Qingxue slowly woke up. The nurse had just given her a dose of pregnancy-stabilizing injection and a round of injections. She was in so much pain that her body stiffened for a moment and tears streamed down her face. She could not take pain very well. Injections were not very painful, but this time, they were injected with gonadotropin, so they had to use sterilized injection water. This kind of sterilized injection water was extremely painful. What was even more painful was that she would have to receive an injection every day depending on the situation. It turned out that the pregnancy-stabilizing needle was so painful. She remembered that when she was in the modeling industry, she had heard of a story about a model who became a mistress and eventually married into a rich family. However, when she got pregnant, she was already 40 years old. This elderly woman had already had 3 miscarriages. Actually, at her age, pregnancy was a high risk. But after marrying into a rich family, everyone in the family had their eyes fixed on her belly. After all, with her background as a model, it wasn't easy for her to climb into a rich family. Naturally, her belly had to work harder. Therefore, for her 4th child, the doctor said that her cervix was not functioning properly. In order to keep this child, she was bedridden for 142 days and injected with more than 300 doses of pregnancy-stabilizing injections. Finally, she was able to give birth to Lin. More than 300 fetus-stabilizing needles were said to be very painful. Meng Qingxue scoffed at first, but when she experienced it herself, she deeply understood the pain. When she thought of the torment she would have to go through every day, she suddenly felt as if she could not see the light of day. Chapter 27:02. You. What are you doing? You can't get out of bed yet. Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao. She muttered. The thought of Xiao Bao being taken away without any news made her anxious. Mu Yancheng pushed the door open and walked in. Seeing her arguing with the nurse and wanting to get out of bed, he immediately rushed forward and held her. What are you doing? Hearing his voice, Meng Qingxue's body stiffened. She looked up in a daze and saw that it was him. Her eyes reddened immediately. Yancheng. Why are you here? Without waiting for him to explain, Meng Qingxue suddenly pushed his chest with all her might. I don't want to see you. Go away. I don't want to see you again. Mu Yancheng, didn't I say that we're done? Mu Yancheng's eyes flashed and his face tensed up. I never said that I wanted to cut ties with you. That's your unilateral declaration. Meng Qingxue opened her mouth but did not say anything. Instead, tears gushed out of her eyes. What do you want in order for you to let me go? Her almost begging tone made him feel complicated for a moment. Especially when he saw her pair of weak and helpless eyes, he actually felt as if a sharp sword had pierced his heart, causing him incomparable pain. Where is the child? Meng Qingxue's face turned paler as she stared into his eyes. Mu Yancheng, on the other hand, was perplexed. He did not know what the child she was referring to was. What child? Meng Qingxue obviously thought that the two men who had taken away Xiao Bao were his subordinates. She was stunned when she saw his confused look. A 5-year-old child. Mu Yancheng, don't play dumb with me. Didn't you send 2 men to find me? They kept saying that they were looking for the child. Aren't they here for the child in my stomach? She gasped for a while, then angrily grabbed his collar. They misinterpreted your words and took Xiao Bao Chu away. I don't care if you want to abort the child in my belly or what, do as you please. After all, this child is also your flesh and blood. You have the right to decide her life and death. I won't hide anymore, I won't run anymore. But that child is innocent. I don't understand what you mean. Qingxue, have you misunderstood something? Mu Yancheng was baffled. Didn't you send someone to look for me? Of course. However, I definitely did not give any other orders. I sent people to look for you, not to kill the child in your stomach. Mu Yancheng vowed solemnly. Meng Qingxue was startled, and her face immediately turned pale. What did you say? Mu Yancheng explained, Qingxue, do you know? After you left, I've been trying to track you down. It wasn't easy to get news of you, so I rushed over without stopping. As for the child in your stomach, I will never abort it. I'm more than happy that you're willing to give birth to it for me. I'll take on the responsibility of a father and raise the child together. Meng Qingxue's eyes lost focus. She was not in the mood to listen to him, but her mind was constantly reminding her of a fact. Since those 2 men were not sent by Mu Yancheng, who could they be? Chapter 27:03. Then, who could it be? Where could the child have gone to? By the time Chu Ho was done with the paperwork, Meng Qingxue had already been transferred to the ward. The moment she stepped into the ward, Meng Qingxue's face turned pale and tears streamed down her face. Chu Ho. Xiao Bao is missing. He was stunned. Her expression froze for a moment, and she found it a little unbelievable. She had always thought that Xiao Bao was in Mu Yancheng's hands. She could tell that Mu Yancheng was here to look for Meng Qingxue and had no intention of harming her or the child in her stomach. Otherwise, he would not have gone through so much trouble to send her to the hospital for emergency treatment. When she first arrived at the hospital, she was also thinking about Xiao Bao. However, Meng Qingxue was in a critical condition at that time, so she did not think too much about it. Hence, she did not remember to ask about it. However, Meng Qingxue told her that Xiao Bao was missing. Xiao Bao isn't with you. Chu Ho was a little surprised, but her face turned pale. In the middle of the night, 2 men barged in and took Xiao Bao away. I chased after them with all my might, but I couldn't catch up to them. Meng Qingxue cried sadly. Chu Ho, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. I've implicated Xiao Bao. Chu Ho did not understand the situation for a moment and only caught the key words. You said that Xiao Bao was taken away by 2 men? I don't know who they are either. They only said that they were looking for a child. I thought that they were sent by Yancheng. Chu He sucked in a deep breath of cold air, and her breathing suddenly quickened. Bang! A loud sound was heard. In the darkness, Xiao Bao was awakened by a violent movement. He suddenly opened his eyes, only to find that the car had stopped at some point. The bang just now was the sound of the front passenger door closing. He looked out of the car window. Outside the window, the sky had already begun to brighten. In the distance, the sky was turning white. It was actually dawn. Outside the window, there was a vast field, but it was more like a wasteland than a field, overgrown with weeds. While he was in a daze, the car door was pulled open. Chu Xiaobao was shocked and immediately shrank his thin body into a corner. His mouth was taped, so he could only make frightened sounds. The man's face couldn't be said to be fierce, but after all, he was a child. Coming to such an unfamiliar environment, he must be lonely and helpless. The fear in his heart was infinitely magnified. The man stepped onto the car and reached out to grab Chu Xiaobao's collar. However, Chu Xiaobao kept shrinking back and shaking his head desperately. Come here. The man immediately scolded him, damn it. Behave yourself. Baby Chu was even more frightened now. He curled up and did not dare to move an inch. The man lost his patience as well. He reached out, grabbed the boy's arm, and practically dragged him out of the car. Being dragged out of the corner alive, Xiao Bao stumbled and almost rolled out of the car and fell to the ground. Ouch! It hurts. Xiao Bao was in so much pain that tears welled up in his eyes. The man kicked him a few times. Didn't I tell you to behave yourself? You can suffer less. Chu Xiaobao looked at him with tears in his eyes. His eyes were red and swollen, and he looked very pitiful. However, the more the man looked at him, the more impatient he became. He lifted him onto his shoulder. After suffering some pain, Xiao Bao became more well-behaved. He stopped kicking his legs and obediently leaned on his shoulder. Chapter 2704. This was the most remote and desolate area in the capital. It used to be a famous industrial zone, so many factories were located here. Later, in order to control the smog, the capital's government focused on the industrial zone and moved the factories to other cities. The factories here were abandoned. Initially, the government wanted to demolish the factories here and develop them into parks or gardens. Alas, this area was notorious for being poisonous. It used to be a rice paddy, but after it became an industrial zone, the sewage levels far exceeded the standards and polluted the river. The surrounding fields were barren. When half of the factories were demolished, the landscaping department came to investigate and found that the land was seriously polluted and unsuitable for a park, so it was abandoned. Many factories were put on hold halfway through the demolition. The subsequent development projects were all stalled. In order to avoid being noticed, Song Enya chose this deserted place. There was a warehouse here. The man carried Xiao Bao and kicked open the side of the warehouse. He found a stool with a missing leg and tied him to it. Xiao Bao glared at him with tears in his eyes. The man warned him a few more times before walking out of the door to make a call. Hello, is this Miss Song? Yes, I've brought him here. When will you be coming over? Are you on your way? Okay, 20 minutes. No hurry. We'll wait for you. Baby Chu, who was separated by a wall, could only hear the man's words. It seemed that a woman was coming over. Was he really abducted by human traffickers? Xiao Bao was trembling with fear and could not sit still. After the man ended the call, he walked in again. Together with him, the man in charge of driving came over with 2 cans of beer. He gave him a can and a packet of ham and bread. Come, have some beer to refresh yourself. After driving for an entire night, he was very sleepy. In order to report to the police, he did not stop to rest along the way and drove 130 kilometers to the destination. The 2 men were obviously exhausted. Big brother, how much do you think we'll get for completing this mission? This employer is very generous. She said that as long as we bring him here, she'll give me 500,000 yuan in cash. The other man was speechless. 500,000? So much? Huh. Once we get the money, we'll split it in half. I heard that you're going to get married. With 250,000 yuan, you can build a decent 3-story house in your hometown. The man grinned from ear to ear. This employer is so generous. 500,000, I've never seen so much money in my life. What is this? Work hard with me, and you'll be able to earn a few 100,000 next year. The man spoke boldly, and the other person was also greatly encouraged. When Chu Xiaobao heard this, he was even more certain that he had been abducted by human traffickers. Suddenly, he started to cry. Woo woo woo, along the way, he was travel-worn. He curled up in a dusty corner and his face was covered in dust. When his tears washed over him, it was inevitable that he looked a little unkempt. However, the 2 men were indifferent. They only glanced in his direction and sneered, "You don't say, this child has delicate features. She's very pretty. I don't know why this mysterious employer wants to kidnap this child. I don't understand." Chapter 2705. Don't ask too much, it won't do us any good. Thus, the 2 men started chatting among themselves. After an unknown amount of time, Baby Chu suddenly heard the sound of a car's horn coming from outside. His head jerked up, and the 2 men became agitated at once. They looked at each other and walked toward the door. A Volkswagen Magenta was parked outside. Song Enya alighted from the car, and the 2 men greeted her warmly with smiles. "Miss Song, you're here. He's already in the warehouse." He. Their faces were full of flattery. Song Enya hummed in acknowledgement. Wearing a pair of sunglasses on her face, she looked calm and unperturbed as she asked warily, "Did anyone notice us along the way?" No. We hid the child in a corner, no one noticed him." Song Enya cocked a brow when she sensed that something was amiss. Child? What she wanted was Meng Qingxue, how could it be a child? Yes. We did everything according to your orders. Song Enya looked even more surprised. Ignoring the surprise in her heart, she immediately said, "Bring me to have a look." The 2 men also noticed that her expression was a little strange. They did not bother to exchange pleasantries and immediately led her in respectfully. Song Enya had just stepped into the warehouse when the dust in the air assailed her nostrils. She waved her hand in disgust, and the 2 men at the side immediately waved for her as if to flatter her, chuckling. "There's quite a lot of dust here." "Where is he?" she asked. One of the men grinned and pointed at Xiao Bao, who was tied to a stool. "There. He's over there." The moment he spoke, he had a strong local accent. Song Enya frowned again and looked in the direction he was pointing, only to see a 5-year-old child tied to a stool. He stared at her with a pair of innocent eyes as he trembled in fear. Her face turned pale. She turned around abruptly and swept a sharp glance at them. "What do you mean? Are you playing with me? Miss Song, What do you mean by that? The man stared at her in confusion. This child isn't what I want. Why did you kidnap this child? Song Enya looked furious. Didn't I give you a woman's photo? Where's that woman? Huh? The two men widened their eyes and looked at each other in dismay, but they were a little stunned. One of them mustered up his courage and asked, Miss Song, didn't you say that you want a child? We found that woman, but you said that you want a child, so we've captured this child. Song Enya understood everything at once. Useless. It turned out that they had misunderstood her intentions. They had kidnapped the innocent child and brought her here, but the person she wanted was not brought here. She was so angry that she wanted to slap each of them. Fortunately, she still had a trace of reason. These two men came from remote villages. They were barefooted and not afraid of wearing shoes. If she hit them, they would be angry. In the wilderness, she could not guarantee her safety. She forced, Song Enya's, Song Enya good. Are you all idiots? What I want is the child in that woman's belly. This. Chapter 2706. After a long while, they finally reacted and asked tentatively, does this mean that we've got the wrong person? This deal doesn't count. She spat fiercely and turned to leave. Seeing that she was about to leave, the two men exchanged glances and immediately rushed forward to stop her. You're leaving just like that? How can this deal not count? We went through so much trouble to drag that person here, and now you're saying that the deal is off? Does that mean that all our hard work was for nothing? You didn't bring the person I wanted. Why? Do you still want money? She snorted and tried to walk around them, but the men blocked her again and blocked the door. It was obvious that they would not let her leave just like that. She sized them up and sneered. What? Are you guys going to rob me? The man smiled rudely. Miss Song, you have to follow the rules when doing business. We're just following your instructions. How can you blame us for not making yourself clear? How do I know that you're doing things for me honestly? You didn't find the person you wanted, so you just kidnapped a child and did a half-hearted job. Do I still have to obediently pay you a commission? That's not how it should be. Miss Song, how about this? Since the person we brought isn't the one you wanted, we still put in the effort. What we want is not bad, so we deserve 100,000 yuan for our hard work. She could not help snorting. You guys are asking for too much. The two men exchanged glances, and their expressions changed slightly. They were no longer as polite as before. She felt inexplicably guilty, but she did not show it on her face. Instead, she asked coldly, do you know who I am? How dare you stand in my way? No matter who you are, even if you're the emperor, I don't care. Let's not talk about 500,000 yuan, but we still have to pay for our hard work. More or less, we have to show some appreciation, right? In order to bring that person here, we worked through the night. If you want to leave without paying us a single cent, we won't let you out of this door. Song Enya was at a loss for words, but she was sober enough to realize that she could only admit that she was at a disadvantage by making a deal with such a person. Thus, she took a few deep breaths and expressionlessly fished out the cash from her handbag. When the two men saw that her handbag was full of cash, they exchanged glances with each other. One of the men suddenly reached out and snatched her handbag. Song Enya was taken aback, only to see the man calmly take out all the cash from her handbag. She weighed it in her hand and estimated that it was about 50 to 60,000 yuan. She guessed that the rest of the cash was in the car, but they knew not to make things difficult for her. Once they got the money, they threw her handbag on the ground and turned to leave. Song Enya was so furious that her lungs were about to explode. She watched as the two men got into the car and sped off, leaving her speechless. She was about to leave when she suddenly thought of something. She turned around and looked at Xiao Bao, who was left in the warehouse. She frowned but did not say anything. She turned around and left. Although this child was a little pitiful, she naturally could not care about him, lest she got herself into trouble. He might as well just leave him here. Whether he lived or died, he would be left to his own devices. Chapter 2707. He was safe. This meant that he was no longer in danger. However, he soon realized that he was abandoned in the wilderness like an abandoned cat or dog. What should he do? How could he find his way home? Xiao Bao's mind was filled with thoughts of how to get home. However, what made him anxious was that all four of his hands were tied up. Moreover, he could not even give out the detailed address of his house. What should he do? Xiao Bao forced himself to calm down as soon as possible. At this critical moment, this little guy was considered smart. He knew that he could not just sit there and wait for death. He should try his best to leave this place. He glanced at the stool he made and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He suddenly struggled and swayed. The chair was old. It had been raining for many years and the warehouse had a lot of water. The solid wood back of the chair was badly corroded. After being tossed around by him, it actually fell apart. Both of his hands were handcuffed to the pillars of the back of the chair. When the chair fell apart, he held on to the back of the chair and struggled to the side of the wall. He used his body to hit it hard. After several attempts, the back of the chair finally cracked. He struggled hard and the pillars of the back of the chair completely fell apart. Both of his hands were freed, but the handcuffs could not be removed. However, he could finally leave this godforsaken place. Xiao Bao was about to walk out of the door when he suddenly caught a glimpse of 2 pieces of half-eaten bread and ham on the ground from the corner of his eye. He struggled internally for a while and picked them up. He did not eat or drink for the whole night. He was already famished and his stomach was growling. Therefore, he could not care less. However, the little guy had a serious obsession with cleanliness. He wiped the places where the bread was stained with dust and carefully tore off the places where they had bitten. He took a bite and hid the remaining bread and ham in his trouser pocket before leaving the warehouse. When he walked out of the door, what entered his eyes was a barren land. He looked at the horizon and judged the direction. The little guy was smart. He walked to the road and asked around. One road was wide and unobstructed. On one side, there was a small road that led to a dilapidated area. Looking at the end, there was a barren forest. On the other side, there was no end in sight. If I choose a good road, should be able to reach the county, right? The little guy grew up in the countryside, so he only had a rough idea of a county town. In his impression, a county town was extremely prosperous. Once he reached the county town, he could ask the police for help. His mother said that if he encountered any danger, the first thing to do was to look for the police. The police would help him find his home. He thought optimistically as he walked in the direction he had set his mind on. Fortunately, he had slept in the car for a night, so he was still quite energetic. However, he didn't know how long he had been walking, but the road was still endless. He walked to the junction of a national highway and suddenly found a road sign. He ran to the bottom of the road sign. He was not very literate, but he could vaguely recognize a few commonly used words. The arrow marked 3 directions. It was a 3-way road. He was in a dilemma. However, the little guy had his own way. Chu Xiaobao raised his little finger and poked at the road sign. Point the soldiers, point the generals, point the soldiers, point the generals, I will go that way. After confirming the direction, Xiao Bao finally made his choice. Chapter 2708. In the afternoon, the sun was a little strong, making his mouth dry and thirsty. Even if he was hungry, he really could not swallow the dry bread. Hence, he took out the ham with heartache and took a bite to allay his hunger. Usually, it was not that he had not walked the mountain roads, but after all, a child's physical strength was limited, and so was his willpower. However, he had a firm belief in his heart, to find the way home and return to his mother's side. Otherwise, his mother would be worried sick. He could not let his mother worry. He must pull himself together. Just like that, the little guy supported his tired body, hugged the little dry food left, and walked until the sky turned dark. The sky gradually darkened. He was so tired that his head was dizzy, and his clothes were drenched in sweat. At night, the temperature suddenly dropped sharply, and the wind also became stronger. When it blew on his body, the chill came in waves, and the pores on his skin shrank. Chu Xiaobao did not know how long he walked until the sky turned dark. Finally, he could not walk anymore. In addition, it was late, so he found a cleaner place, sat up, and curled his body into a small ball to avoid the wind. His heel was in terrible pain. He took off his shoes and realized that a layer of skin on his heel was abraded. That place was painful even when touched. He walked for the whole day, and in the end, he was limping. Chu Xiaobao felt a wave of sadness, and his nose twitched. He felt that he was really pitiful to be left alone in the wilderness, and he did not know when he would be able to walk back to the county. He took out the dry food from his trouser pocket. There was only half of the ham left, and the bread had been wiped out in the evening. He hugged the ham and was about to gnaw on it, but a few whimpering sounds came from the side. He was shocked, and turned back to look vigilantly, only to realize that it was a dirty little white dog. It was thin and weak, and looked very young. Its originally snow-white fur was now dirty and gray, but that pair of innocent and pure eyes, set against the moonlight, were bright and lively. The little dog's eyes stared fixedly at the ham in his hand. This little dog was probably hiding here, as a dog's nose was more sensitive. It smelled the fragrance of the ham, and so it walked over. Chu Xiaobao saw the little dog staring at the ham in his hand, licking it with its tongue carefully, as if it was not brave enough, and actually did not dare to go forward. Seeing its skinny appearance, he could not help but feel a little heartache. But now, he was in trouble. He only had this little food left. After eating it, there would be no more. Moreover, he was so hungry that he couldn't take it anymore. He was using the empty fort strategy. This little bit of food wasn't enough to fill him up. Sorry. The boy's heart ached as he apologized. I'm hungry, too, if not, I'll let you have this piece of ham. The little dog naturally could not understand human language. It tilted its head and continued to stare at that piece of ham, and from time to time, it sized him up, as if it was begging for alms. That pair of innocent eyes was hard to reject. Chu Xiaobao simply did not look at it. He steeled his heart and turned his head away. Just as he was about to gnaw, he heard another whimper beside him. He looked over again. The little dog was probably starving, and in the end, it actually laid down not far away from him, still looking at him helplessly. Its aggrieved look really made one's heart ache. Chapter 2709. Xiaobao hooked his finger at it, but the puppy did not dare to come over. He broke the ham into two halves and tempted it. The puppy was still on guard. It wanted to go forward, but it was afraid that he would hurt it. Xiaobao put the other half of the ham aside and did not bother about it. He turned his head to eat his own. Seeing that he was not looking at it, the puppy carefully crawled forward. It used its claws to hook the ham and held it in its mouth. It brought it to a corner and chewed on it with relish. Perhaps because they were starving, the two of them finished the ham in no time at all. The puppy gradually lowered its guard against him and slowly moved to his side. It sniffed the corner of his shirt and rubbed against him, as if it was not afraid of him anymore. Xiaobao smiled and hugged it in his arms. He gently stroked its fur. Good boy. Good boy. Will you sleep with me tonight? Just as he finished his sentence, the puppy's ears pricked up as if it had caught the rustling of grass in the wind. It suddenly turned its head and looked in the direction of the road, eyeing it covetously. Xiaobao followed its gaze and looked over. After a while, he heard what sounded like a row of cars driving over. There's someone. He carried the puppy and stood up in surprise. After a while, he saw a row of cars driving over at high speed and whizzing past him. He did not even have the time to wave his hand as the cars drove away in the opposite direction. Ah! Wait! Seeing that his only chance of survival had passed him by, Xiao Bao was extremely unwilling. He lowered his head in frustration and was about to give up. However, he thought that this was probably his only chance of survival. After thinking for a while, he suddenly furrowed his brows and made up his mind. He put on his shoes again and chased after the cars. The puppy was also intelligent as it chased after him. After chasing for a long time, Xiao Bao suddenly realized that the row of black cars had stopped not far ahead. At the same time, there was a very big van. He saw a glimmer of hope and regained his full strength. He ran towards the place where the cars were parked. When he ran to the place where the car was parked, he found that the people in the car were not there, and he did not know where they went. He tried to pull the door, one by one, seemed to be locked. Just as he was in despair, the Mercedes-Benz at the front of the line was not locked. The door opened, and without thinking, he went straight into the warm car. Wow! It's so warm. Xiao Bao sat on the high-end leather seat, feeling extremely satisfied. He carried the puppy in and closed the car door to keep the cold wind out. The back seat of the car was very spacious, so spacious that it was frightening. He stretched out his legs and lay down comfortably. Out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly caught a glimpse of a cup on the cup holder of the armrest of the driver's seat. He hesitated for a moment before taking the cup and opening the quilt. There was actually tea inside. Smelling it, it smelled so good. He was already thirsty. He held the cup and drank to his heart's content. However, he was kind enough to leave a small mouthful. He held it in his hand and put it in front of the puppy. Here. You're thirsty too, right? The puppy immediately used its tongue to lick the water clean. After drinking the tea, the little guy was tired. It did not know when the owner of the car would return. Hence, it nestled in the car and fell asleep in a daze. Chapter 27:10. Not far from where the car was parked, there was a large wasteland. At this moment, it was already late at night. The sky was as dark as ink, and not a single star could be seen. The two teams agreed to meet in the wasteland to carry out the transaction. The van parked by the roadside was full of military weapons and an order of 200 million in cash. Among the crowd of people dressed in suits and leather shoes, Gu Jinglian was surrounded by fully armed bodyguards. He was wearing a white shirt, black slim-fit trousers, and a long trench coat. Dressed in black, he almost blended into the night. His sharp black hair was smooth and black. Perhaps it had not been trimmed for a while, as the fine hair on his forehead covered his deep eyebrows. His eyes were unruly, and the slightly raised corners of his eyes were tinged with a bit of awe-inspiring but cold evilness. At the corner of his eye, there was a mole that added a touch of coquettishness. His angular facial features were engraved with deep shadows under the night sky. The earring on his ear was extremely eye-catching, and it set off a somewhat evil and unrestrained temperament. His face was extremely handsome, and such a face was somewhat incompatible with his identity. Back when the Gu clan had a change of power, he was still a young man when he first took over. On the day he took over, he was also dressed like this. His face was handsome, like a beautiful young man. Everyone in the Gu clan, from the elders to the hall masters of the 4 great halls, did not take him seriously. However, contrary to his appearance, his methods were extremely ruthless. From when he took over the position of the head of the family to when he suppressed the rebellious forces in the family, it was only half a year. Everyone in the Gu family was convinced. Under his beautiful appearance was an extremely cold heart, and his scalp-numbing sharp and ruthless methods. It was said that there was an elder who wanted to seize power and push him out of the position. Gu Jinglian did not care about the brotherhood at all. He broke the tendons of the elder's hands and feet, cut off his palms, and expelled him from the Gu family without batting an eye. It was obvious that he was ruthless. The cold wind blew. He silently lit a cigarette, and a wisp of dense smoke escaped from his lips. Suddenly, a bodyguard walked over and whispered in his ear. "President Gu, the other party's men are all here." "Oh?" Gu Jinglian glanced at him slightly, but the voice that escaped from his lips was incomparably clear and extremely magnetic. "How many?" 20 men and 5 cars. He pursed his lips. "You didn't bring your car?" "The other party said that they want to trade with the truck and tow it away." "Oh." Gu Jinglian flicked the ash from his cigarette and said calmly, "Let them come over." "Yes." That person retreated, and not long after, the other party's troops were brought over. The people who came were also dressed in black. The man in the lead was quite old. He was tall and thin, with a beard and deep wrinkles. He was obviously in his 30s, but he looked like he was in his 50s, like a rotten piece of wood. "Boss Gu, I've kept you waiting. However, we also arrived early. It's just that we're not familiar with the place and got the wrong direction." When that person opened his mouth, his signature smoker's voice was extremely hoarse. Gu Jinglian turned to face him and looked him up and down with a deep gaze. It was obvious that he was scrutinizing him. Chapter 27:11. Gu Jinglian glanced at him but did not extend his hand. Instead, his gaze fell on the other party's outstretched hand. His 5 calloused fingers were thick and ugly. Years of smoking had turned his fingers yellow and looked a little dirty. Gu Jinglian was known for being a clean freak. He frowned in disgust and said coldly, "Your hands are really dirty." His tone was condescending and somewhat contemptuous. The man's face immediately showed some embarrassment. He already knew that Gu Jinglian was arrogant and did not take anyone seriously. Hence, he resentfully retracted his hand and tried to smooth things over. "Boss Gu is young and full of vigor. You're full of style." Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly, "There's no need for unnecessary pleasantries. Our time is precious. Let's make it short. We'll hand over the money and the goods at the same time." "Yes, yes, yes." The man immediately snapped his fingers and the men behind him immediately walked over with a few suitcases. Gu Jinglian glanced at them. There were a total of 6 large suitcases. "Didn't you say cash?" Gu Jinglian frowned. "There isn't 200 million in cash here, right? This is only a part of it. The rest is in the car. US dollars? You don't have to worry about that. Anyway, the price we agreed on before will not change." Gu Jinglian smiled slightly and waved his hand gently. The men beside him walked over and were about to take the suitcases from them when the man said, "Boss Gu, didn't you say that we'll hand over the money and the goods at the same time? Before the official transaction, you should at least let us see the goods you brought, right? The process of checking the goods cannot be skipped." Gu Jinglian glanced at him and sneered. "Sure." In front of the van, the door slowly opened. The huge warehouse of the van was filled with unassembled junhuos. The 200 million order was all here. The man immediately sent someone to check the goods. Half an hour later, the man jumped out of the van and said to him, "The goods are all here. They're all good stuff." The man suddenly smiled and turned to look at Gu Jinglian. "Not bad. Very sincere. These are all good stuff. I'm very satisfied with the goods. Then, it's time for me to see your sincerity." Gu Jinglian smiled, 200 million in cash is accepted. The car keys are yours. You can drive this car. This truck is my gift to you for our first meeting. Sure, sure. The man gave a look, and his men immediately presented 6 large suitcases in front of him. Gu Jinglian casually opened them, but what he saw was a box full of white powder. The curve of his lips suddenly turned cold, and he frowned slightly. White powder, this thing was not unfamiliar. The previous agreement was 200 million in cash, plus the 5 million deposit that was previously transferred to his account, but now it was just a few boxes of drugs? A hint of coldness appeared on Gu Jinglian's face. He closed the box and looked up coldly. What is this? His voice sounded like it was sealed in ice. The man immediately explained, don't look down on these. They're all good stuff. They're all top-quality goods. These are all top-quality goods from Myanmar. After some processing, they can be sold at a high price. It's definitely more than 200 million. For this deal, I'm willing to part with my treasures. Originally, I planned to keep these goods for myself. Gu Jinglian's eyes did not waver. His voice gradually turned cold. I remember that I asked for cash. There was a hint of danger in his cold voice. Chapter 27:12. The man laughed dryly. He, we came here in a hurry. We didn't have time to prepare. Also, it's dangerous to carry so many US dollars with us. The atmosphere froze. Gu Jinglian sneered. His cold expression sent chills down one's spine and made one shudder. He picked up a packet and blew the thin film with his fingertips. The white powder flew with the cold wind. I want cash. How stupid are you to think of using these things to trade? This. The man's expression suddenly turned ugly. Gu Jinglian, these are all good things. You, Gu Jinglian interrupted him impatiently. Do you know the consequences of wasting my time? What? Before the man could finish his sentence, he saw Gu Jinglian suddenly take out a gun from his waist. He loaded it neatly and aimed it between the man's eyebrows without any hesitation. Bang! Blood splattered everywhere. What are you doing? The other party immediately took out their guns, but Gu Jinglian's men moved quickly. Bang! 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 Along with the gunshots that had been silenced, the group of people became cold corpses on the ground in the blink of an eye. Gu Jinglian did not have the patience to stay at the scene. He turned around expressionlessly. The bodyguards beside him immediately followed and escorted him to the car. Mr. Gu, how should we deal with these people? Do you still need me to teach you? Gu Jinglian was in a bad mood. He opened the car door and ordered coldly, check carefully. Don't leave anyone alive. Clean up the scene. Yes. He turned around and was about to get into the car when he caught a glimpse of a child curled up quietly in the corner of the back seat. The puppy in his arms was alert. It immediately woke up when it heard the gunshots. When it saw someone open the door, it glared at Gu Jinglian fiercely. It bared its teeth and its eyes suddenly became fierce and vigilant. The child, on the other hand, was sleeping very soundly. The gunshots just now did not wake him up. Perhaps he was too tired. Once he fell asleep, he would be unconscious. Gu Jinglian looked at him and saw that his clothes were white from washing. His body was stained with mud, his shoes were tattered, his hair was messy, and his originally delicate and cute little face was covered with dust. He was in a sorry state. Where did this kid come from? Gu Jinglian was a little surprised. He had only left for a while, but he did not expect to see another child in the car when he returned. He raised his head and looked around. This was a desolate place that he had purposely chosen for the transaction. There were very few people around. Where the hell did this kid come from? When the bodyguard saw this, he was also very surprised. Just as he leaned over to wake the child up, the dog in Chu Xiaobao's arms immediately reacted and barked. The barking woke Xiaobao up. He suddenly opened his eyes and sat up straight. His clear and beautiful eyes met Gu Jinglian's. Ah! Gu Jinglian's eyes were filled with malice. He was quite frightened. This man was so scary. He was full of murderous intent. It was so scary. Although he looked like a very young and handsome man, his cold eyes made people's hair stand on end. Uncle. Uncle. Chu Xiaobao opened his mouth in a panic and said these two words. Chapter 27:13. Before Gu Jinglian could speak, Chu Xiaobao immediately said in fear, "Uncle. Don't chase me out of the car, okay? I was left here by bad people. If you chase me out of the car, I'll definitely die." Die? Gu Jinglian's lips twitched as he glanced around. What he said was true. If he was left here alone, a 5-year-old child would not be able to escape. No matter how strong he was, he would not be able to escape. However, this child could not tell whether he was a good person or a bad person. How could he be so sure that he would not be sold elsewhere? This child looked just like the little white dog in his arms. He looked pitiful and aggrieved. He was just short of hugging his leg and acting pitiful. "Aren't you afraid that I'm a bad person?" Gu Jinglian asked. Chu Xiaobao tilted his head and asked curiously, "Bad person? Aren't you afraid that I'll sell you off?" "Uncle, you look very rich." Chu Xiaobao patted the genuine leather seat he was sitting on and said with a smile, "Even if you sold me off, you wouldn't be able to afford this car." "Uncle, you must be a good person." Gu Jinglian was speechless. The word "good person" had never been used to describe him. He curled his lips and said casually, "I'm not a good person." Chu Xiaobao did not believe a word he said. It was hard for him to associate such an elegant and noble man with the word "bad person." Hence, he said sweetly, How can a bad person admit that he's a bad person? I think that only people who commit murder and arson are bad people." "Uncle, you look handsome and rich. You must be a good person." Just as he finished speaking, there was a loud boom. The warehouse behind the car was hit by gunpowder. The fire spread quickly and formed a huge fire. Under Xiaobao's stunned gaze, a tall and burly man walked to Gu Jinglian's side and said respectfully, "President Gu, the body count has been completed. It has been thrown into the warehouse and burned." Gu Jinglian nodded casually. When he turned around, he saw that Xiaobao's expression was stiff. He pointed in the direction of the fire and asked in horror, Why is there a fire there?" Gu Jinglian said casually, "I did it." "Why did you set the fire?" Chu Xiaobao was a little scared. His voice became softer and softer, and his shoulders trembled faintly. "Because I killed someone and set the fire to destroy the evidence." Chu Xiaobao didn't understand the idiom, "destroy the evidence," but he understood the sentence, "I killed someone." His mouth instantly formed an O shape. Gu Jinglian smiled. "Are you scared?" Xiaobao swallowed hard and then nodded hurriedly. "Uncle, you're really a bad person?" "That's impossible." "Uncle, you can't be a bad person." Gu Jinglian was impatient and said coldly, "Get out of the car." Xiaobao swallowed again. However, he looked carefully at the barren scene outside the window and shook his head. "I don't want to." Chapter 27:14. The corners of Gu Jinglian's eyes twitched violently again. He understood the logic behind it. But what did it mean to win over a 7-storied pagoda? On second thought, he was a 5-year-old child after all. It was inevitable that he would speak incoherently sometimes. Chu Xiaobao saw his cold-blooded face and his seemingly indifferent look. His tears fell even more violently. He hugged the puppy tightly in his arms as if trying to arouse his compassion. "I'm only 5 years old. I'm still a child. Uncle, please be kind and save me, okay? I won't pester you, and I won't blackmail you. Just send me to the county's police station, and that will be enough. Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? Okay? Okay?" Chu Xiaobao's coquettishness was definitely top-notch. At that moment, he was like a puppy wagging its tail and looking at him with a pair of innocent eyes, as if throwing him out of the car was a heinous crime. Gu Jinglian was getting a headache from his series of "okay?" He frowned and said coldly, I can send you to the police station, but you have to be quiet on the way, okay? He had a headache. That was why he hated children. He was chattering like a noisy little bird, challenging the limits of his patience. Chu Xiaobao saw that he had finally agreed. His eyes lit up and his expression became lively in an instant. He nodded repeatedly. Okay, okay, okay. Uncle, don't worry. I won't disturb you. I'll be quiet and not talk. You just have to. Another long string of nagging. Gu Jinglian was annoyed. He got into the car and blocked his mouth with his slender fingers. He ordered fiercely, shut up. Oh. Chu Xiaobao was frightened by his gloomy expression. He immediately zipped up his pants and made an okay sign with a clever smile. It's fine as long as you can send me to the police station. Once I find the police uncle, he will definitely help me find my home. When I get home, I'll definitely send you a thank you letter and some local specialties from my hometown. Chu Xiaobao was so grateful that he danced with joy, extremely excited. Gu Jinglian furrowed his brows with a headache and appeared indifferent. Up to you. The car started. The chauffeur turned on the heater, and a warm breeze blew through the entire car, filling the air with warmth. Along the way, the carriage was quiet. Chu Xiaobao closed his eyes for a while. After being awakened, his spiritual energy became vigorous. Hugging the little white dog, he leaned against the car window and curiously looked at the scenery outside. There wasn't much to see along the way. After all, it was dark at night. The empty suburban road didn't have any lights, so there wasn't much to see. However, Chu Xiaobao felt that it was a novel idea. He had never sat in such a high-end car. He grew up in Yen City, and his most vivid impression of cars was when he went to the county market and saw a three-pronged car. He excitedly pointed at the car and asked what it was. Chu Ho said that each car cost hundreds of thousands. Chu Xiaobao remembered it until now. Gu Jinglian closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, treating him as if he did not exist. It was so quiet that Xiaobao felt bored. He looked at the little dog and said to himself, Little doggy, you're not cold anymore. It's so warm in the car. Whoa. Chapter 27:15. After all, this cold-looking uncle had agreed to send him to the police station, which made him feel extremely grateful. He couldn't give him anything in return, but it was only right for him to praise him. You're tall and handsome. Many girls must like you. Whoa, Chu Xiaobao played with the puppy's paws and smiled. If only I could be as handsome as you when I grow up. Gu Jinglian, who was taking a nap, heard this and couldn't help but frown. Uncle, are there a lot of girls who like you? Chu Xiaobao saw that he had his eyes closed and was ignoring him, so he turned to look at him with his head tilted. This uncle is really very handsome. He was more handsome than many celebrities on TV. However, he suddenly noticed something and exclaimed in surprise. He stretched out his hand and said, Uncle, there's a speck of dust on your eye. Xiaobao will help you wipe it clean. Then, he crawled over, stretched out his chubby little hand, and used his fingertips to wipe the mole at the corner of his eye. He actually treated the mole at the corner of Gu Jinglian's eye as a speck of dust. Gu Jinglian finally couldn't take it anymore. He reached out to grab his little hand and glared at him coldly. Do you want to die? Chu Xiaobao trembled in fear. He was obviously helping him wipe off the dirt. He wasn't asking for death. He immediately explained weakly, I saw something dirty on your face. The veins on Gu Jinglian's eyebrows twitched. He said eerily, if you make any more noise, I'll throw you out of the car. Chu Xiaobao immediately retracted his little hand. He was so frightened that he sat up straight and looked straight ahead. Gu Jinglian crossed his arms in satisfaction. He really didn't like dealing with children. However, it seemed to be ungentlemanly to kick a child out of the car in the wilderness. It was within his patience to give him a ride. Half an hour later, the car drove onto the outer ring of the highway. On Daga, the night view of the bustling city could be seen at a glance. Although it was already late at night, it was also the time when the city was truly bustling. If it had been Yen City, it would have been pitch black by now. Chu Xiaobao leaned against the window and looked at the charming neon lights of the city. His eyes widened in amazement. Countless lights were lit up. From afar, it looked like a vast starry sky, dotted with stars. Countless neon lights were flowing with brilliant colors. It was unbelievably beautiful. Chu Xiaobao, who grew up in the countryside, was also mesmerized by the bustling scenery. A surprised expression appeared on his face. Wow! Is there such a tall building in the county? Is that flashing light a lamp? I've never seen such a beautiful lamp. So beautiful, so beautiful. The little fellow's vocabulary was limited. After pondering for a long time, he could only think of words like beautiful and beautiful to describe her. Gu Jinglian instructed the driver, after we get off the highway, send this guy to the police station. Yes. Just as the boy was engrossed in the food, his stomach suddenly started acting up again, and he kept singing, coo, coo. He gently rubbed his deflated belly and encouraged himself. Hang in there for a little while. There will be food soon. Gu, what answered him was such a desolate voice. The road on Daga seemed extremely long and far in his hunger. Chapter 27:16. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He mustered up his courage and suddenly tugged at Gu Jinglian's sleeve, trying to sound him out. Uncle, Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and gave him a sidelong glance. Yes? I'm hungry. Chu Xiaobao's meaning behind his words was, can you take me to fill my stomach? Gu Jinglian seemed a little unromantic and asked back, so? Is there anything to eat? No. Chu Xiaobao didn't give up and mustered up his courage to ask again. I'm so hungry. I haven't had a full meal for the whole day. So? Uncle, can you take me to fill my stomach? Gu Jinglian's gaze was cold. I'm warning you, gulp, my patience is limited. Immediately, gulp, after I send you to the police station, gulp. Every time Gu Jinglian finished his sentence, he was interrupted by the rumbling of Chu Xiaobao's stomach. He saw the little guy staring at him with pitiful eyes. His gaze was miserable and he wanted to say something. He gritted his teeth and glared at him fiercely for a long time. KFC was open 24 hours a day. 12:30 a.m. Business dropped sharply. The waiter was mopping the floor when he suddenly heard the sound of the door closing. Following that, he heard a lot of people walking in. The waiter looked up in confusion and was shocked by the spectacular scene in front of him. At the door, a handsome man in a black trench coat with both hands in his trouser pockets pushed open the door and walked in. Beside him was a little guy rubbing his flat stomach and following closely behind. Behind the two of them, a group of bodyguards dressed in black walked in. Every one of them was serious and solemn. Their cold eyes looked around and their aura was terrifying. The waiter was dumbfounded on the spot. What was this? Were they from the Black She Gang? However, I've never seen anyone from the Black Star Gang step into a Western fast food restaurant like KFC. The two cashiers, who were chatting idly in front of the counter, were also stunned. They trembled as they looked at the imposing group walking towards the counter. Gu Jinglian walked to the counter expressionlessly. Xiao Bao, who was beside him, stood on his tiptoes and stretched out his hands to lie on the counter. His eyes were sparkling, like a little mouse that had fallen into a rice bowl. Hi. Hi. Hello. The cashier's teeth were chattering as she struggled to say those words. Gu Jinglian's cold gaze swept over. His aura was condescending as he looked down on everyone. The cashier was so scared that her legs turned to jelly. Gu Jinglian had never been to a place like this before. However, along the way, this was the only fast food restaurant that was still open so late. Although the man in front of her was shockingly handsome, she was still deeply intimidated by the terrifying aura that he exuded. Baby Chu, on the other hand, did not notice the strange scene as he curiously looked up at the menu. Unable to recognize a few words, he asked curiously, "Pretty sister, are there any steamed buns here?" "No." "Then, are there any soup noodles?" "No." "Fried rice? Egg fried rice?" "No." Gu Jinglian asked impatiently, "Then what do we have here?" The cashier's mouth was wide open in shock. It was big enough to swallow 3 eggs. Chapter 27:17. Forgive her for not seeing the world. There was actually someone in this world who had never eaten KFC before. There are hamburgers, grilled wings, fries, egg tarts, and cola. They are all simple Western dishes. After the cashier introduced the dishes with difficulty, her back was covered in cold sweat. Xiao Bao asked curiously, "What's a hamburger?" "A hamburger is a hamburger." "What's an egg tart?" "Is it delicious?" Xiao Bao imagined a tower made of countless eggs, an egg tower. This was the first time he had stepped into such a luxurious restaurant. The dishes on the menu looked delicious, but he had never seen any of them before. The cashier was embarrassed again. "It's quite delicious." "Oh." Xiao Bao excitedly pulled Gu Jinglian's sleeve. Uncle, this beautiful sister said that the egg tarts are delicious. Can I have an egg tart?" Gu Jinglian's lips twitched. He took the menu and pointed at the children's set meal, 2 sets. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, the total is 78 yuan. Cash or Alipay? As soon as the cashier finished speaking, a man in black suddenly strode over, took out his wallet, took out a bill from a stack of money, and handed it to the cashier. The cashier wished she could kneel on the ground to collect the money. After giving him the change while trembling with fear, Gu Jinglian walked to a booth. Baby Chu also skipped over, and the little white puppy followed with its tongue hanging out. After a while, the waiter served the set meal. The freshly made hamburger was soft and tempting. There were freshly squeezed fries, and cola with sparkling water. Everything was extremely novel in Xiao Bao's eyes. He held the hamburger in his hands as if he was holding a tribute and carefully tore open the wrapper. The aroma hit him, and he almost couldn't care less about being reserved and took a bite. It was delicious. Xiao Bao felt that the whole world was shining. The amazing taste almost sent him to the splendid clouds. This was probably the best thing he had ever eaten. 2 pieces of bread with meat. Why is it called a hamburger? That's weird. As he ate, his eyes greedily scanned the plate. He grabbed another French fry and put it into his mouth, eating it with relish. Gu Jinglian rested his chin on his hand lazily and looked at the night view outside the window. His slender fingers tapped lightly on the table. At the side, one of the subordinates suddenly discovered something very surprising. "President Gu, this child looks a lot like you." Gu Jinglian couldn't help but come back to his senses. He followed the line of sight and glanced at Xiao Bao, only to see him taking big bites of hamburgers, stuffing his mouth until it was bulging. However, under the bright light, his delicate little face leaped into his eyes. Earlier in the car, the lights were dim, so she didn't see his face clearly. Now that his subordinate had mentioned it, he took a closer look. Indeed, the eyebrows and eyes were somewhat similar. Her nose and mouth are alike too. She looks just like you when you were young. The subordinate had been by his side since he was young, so he had a deep memory of Gu Jinglian's appearance when he was young. Seeing that Gu Jinglian was indifferent, the subordinate sighed again. President Gu was really cute when he was young. His face was chubby, his eyes were big, and the whites were distinct. "I don't need your opinion." Gu Jinglian interrupted him. Chapter 27:18. The man immediately broke out in a cold sweat and kept quiet. Yes. However, Gu Jinglian took the man's words to heart. He began to look at the child seriously. It was rare for him to look him in the eye. Indeed, as his subordinate had said, this child's eyebrows were very similar to his. Even if they walked out, it would be natural for people to think that they were father and son. What a strange fate. Gu Jinglian asked with rare patience, "What's your name?" Xiao Bao Chu looked up. His mouth was full as he mumbled, "My name is Xiao Bao Chu." "I can't hear you clearly." Xiao Bao Chu immediately hugged the cola and took a big gulp. He wiped his mouth and said with a smile, "My name is Xiao Bao Chu." The Chu in Xiao Bao Chu, the Xiao in Xiao Bao Chu, and the Bao in Chu Xiao Bao Chu. Gu Jinglian's face darkened. What was this? His naive and childish words made the people behind him burst into laughter. What a cute little guy. As Xiao Bao Chu spoke, he suddenly realized that he had spilled the beans. He quickly covered his mouth and looked scared, like a frightened deer. Gu Jinglian couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong now?" Xiao Bao Chu put his hand down. He looked hesitant and a little annoyed. After thinking about it, he said innocently, "Mom said that I can't tell outsiders my name." Gu Jinglian was speechless. Xiao Bao Chu suddenly changed the topic and smiled. "But uncle, you're so good to me. You sent me home and brought me to eat good food. So it doesn't matter if I tell uncle my name. I didn't say that I'll send you home." Gu Jinglian emphasized. "I only said that I'll send you to the police station. Send me to the police station and I'll be able to go home." Xiao Bao Chu smiled. "Uncle, you're a good person. A good person will have a peaceful life." Gu Jinglian frowned. If he were to get married in the future, he would definitely not give birth to such a foolish son. The bodyguard beside him couldn't help but tease him. He said half-jokingly, "Why are you alone? Where is your home?" "My family lives in." Chu Xiaobao opened his mouth, but there was a bit of vigilance in his eyes. Then, he said carefully, "My family lives in Dingcheng." "Yen City?" His subordinates looked at each other. They had never heard of this city before. Where is Yen City? In any case, it's a very far place. At this point, the little guy couldn't help but feel a little dejected. He placed the half-eaten hamburger on his plate with a heavy expression. Mom must be worried sick. Gu Jinglian frowned. Indeed, it was very suspicious for a child to appear in such a remote area. Then why were you there? Chu Xiaobao sighed heavily. It's a long story. But didn't uncle tell me to be quiet? I'd better not say anything. Gu Jinglian, now he knew how to be quiet. He had been chattering along the way. How could he not know how to be quiet? This guy was obviously wary of him and didn't want to talk about it. He didn't expect him to be so vigilant at such a young age. Gu Jinglian watched him eat quietly. Chu Xiaobao was like a little hamster as he ate the two children's meals clean. Finally, he finished with a satisfied burp. Burp. Chapter 27:19. Gu Jinglian frowned. After eating his fill, Chu Bao slumped on the chair, rubbing his round belly and licking the salad dressing on his lips. He was extremely satisfied. Gu Jinglian asked, "Are you full?" "Yeah. I'm full," Xiao Bao said contentedly. When the waiter saw that the little guy had finished eating, he immediately walked over respectfully and presented two cartoon dolls. "Little kid, these are the dolls that came with the children's package. Here. For you." For me? Is it free?" The waiter broke out in cold sweat. "No. This is a gift." Xiao Bao held the two dolls in his arms as if they were priceless treasures. One was a Doraemon doll, and the other was a cartoon figurine with exquisite workmanship. "Thank you, Auntie." He smiled sweetly to express his gratitude. After the waiter left, Xiao Bao handed the toys to Gu Jinglian as if he was presenting a treasure. "Here. Uncle, I'll give you a toy." "No. This toy is very cute. Xiao Bao looked at him with some confusion. A child's world was simple after all. He felt that such a cute toy could actually make him unmoved. He couldn't help but feel a little helpless and said reluctantly, "Since uncle doesn't like it, then I'll have to accept it." What a sly brat. Gu Jinglian got up. "Let's go. I'll send you to the police station." "Okay." Xiao Bao hugged the toys and jumped off the chair with his round belly. However, he was annoyed to find that he seemed to be too full and couldn't walk properly. In addition, he had walked for the whole day and his feet were badly bruised. Earlier, he had been thinking about the delicious food, so he didn't have any scruples. Now that he was full, the pain in his feet was even more obvious. Gu Jinglian had just turned around when he felt a heavy weight on his thigh. He looked down coldly and saw Xiao Bao hugging his thigh. He said eagerly, "Uncle, hug." The bodyguards behind him were dumbfounded. This child was really daring. He actually asked for a hug from the boss. "Can't you walk on your own?" Gu Jinglian ignored him. Chu Xiao Bao said pitifully, "I'm so full, I can't walk anymore." However, he said the same words of wisdom again. "Uncle is so gentle. Give me a hug. Good people will have a peaceful life." Gu Jinglian looked at him gloomily. Just when everyone thought that his patience had reached its limit and he was about to lose his temper, he leaned over slightly and held him in his arms with one hand. Everyone was dumbfounded. President Gu, she actually lowered her status and carried this child. Oh my God. After all, Mr. Gu had never been patient with children. Chu Xiaobao was elated. She gently kissed his cheek and said shyly, "Uncle is the best." Gu Jinglian, he really despised this guy for kissing him. Gu Jinglian carried Xiaobao into the car. When the little white puppy was about to climb into the back seat, he kicked it away coldly and said, "Get lost." When Chu Xiaobao saw this, she let out an "ah" and said hurriedly, "Uncle, why are you so violent? This is my good friend. You can't bully her like this." Gu Jinglian's expression darkened. "Good friend?" Chu Xiaobao ignored his dark expression and clapped her hands at the little white puppy. She called out, "Little white, come quickly. Come into my arms." The little white puppy looked at Gu Jinglian fearfully and nimbly climbed into the car, leaving a dusty paw print on the black leather seat. Chapter 27:20. Baby Chu looked up and saw the man's gloomy gaze. He then followed the man's gaze to the messy paw prints on the leather seat. His brain went boom, and he immediately realized that Xiao Bai seemed to have gotten into a big mess. Hence, he hurriedly rolled up his sleeves and wiped away the dusty paw prints on the seat under Gu Jinglian's cold gaze. However, no matter how hard he wiped, those dusty paw prints could not be wiped off in a short period of time. This was because the puppy's paws secreted grease. Hence, such paw prints needed to be cleaned professionally. Chu Xiaobao furrowed his eyebrows guiltily. "Uncle, I'm sorry, okay? But Little White definitely didn't do it on purpose. You're a big man with an indomitable spirit. You wouldn't be angry with a puppy, right? In other words, if he were to be calculative with a beast, he would not be a man? Was he trying to provoke him?" "Kid, I don't have the patience, I'm not called Little White. I'm called Xiaobao." Chu Xiaobao corrected him righteously. Gu Jinglian finally lost his patience and slammed his fist on the door frame. Chu Xiaobao was instantly shocked. He looked at Gu Jinglian's extremely gloomy face in horror and immediately shut up. He carefully shrank his body into a corner and lowered his head, as if he could reduce his presence by doing so. Suddenly, he said weakly, "You can call me Little White, too. Don't be angry." This uncle was handsome, but his temper did not seem to be very good. Gu Jinglian did not intend to lower himself to his level. Anyway, this kid was going to get lost soon. He got into the car and closed the door. Seeing him get into the car, Chu Xiaobao became even more afraid. He leaned against the window on the other side and shrank back again. Gu Jinglian glanced at him coldly and ignored him. Drive. CEO Gu, are we going to the police station directly? The driver asked with trepidation. From the rearview mirror, Gu Jinglian glanced at him coldly and raised his eyebrows. You know the answer? The driver broke out in cold sweat again. It was so cold. Perhaps it was because Gu Jinglian was in the car, but he felt that the temperature was even colder than outside the window. He immediately turned on the heater. Along the way, Chu Xiaobao was probably full and knew his place. He was no longer chattering like before and had endless things to say. He just quietly hugged the little dog. After eating, he felt sleepy and actually fell asleep in a daze. She fell into a deep sleep. Her body tilted, and she fell into his arms. Gu Jinglian only felt a weight on his leg. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the little fellow's head was naturally resting on his leg. She was resting with a clear conscience. Children have big hearts. No ordinary person would dare to rest their head on his thigh. Gu Jinglian stretched out his hand and was about to move his heavy head away when Chu Xiaobao mumbled something softly. For a moment, he could not hear clearly what he was mumbling. Perhaps he had fallen asleep and was talking in his sleep. He paused for a moment and seemed to be in a daze. From his angle, Chu Xiaobao's handsome side profile was full of childishness. His eyes were closed and his little face was especially quiet. However, his body was slightly curled up as if he did not feel safe. His heart inexplicably softened. Chapter 27-21. Seeing the little boy shrink his shoulders, he raised his eyebrows, took a coat from the side and covered him with it. The bodyguard sitting in the front passenger seat heard the movement in the back seat and could not help but come back to his senses. However, he saw such a rare and precious side of Gu Jinglian. He was extremely tender and could not help but be stunned. Gu Jinglian sensed that he was being sized up. He looked up, but his eyes were cold and sharp in an instant. What's wrong? No, no. Nothing. The bodyguard immediately retracted his gaze and sat up straight. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Turn off the sound system." Yes. The chauffeur immediately reached out to turn off the sound system. The car sped along, but the car was extremely quiet. Xiao Bao lay on his lap at ease and had an incomparably peaceful dream. In the dream, a tall man gently held his hand. When he looked up, even though his facial features could not be seen clearly, his imposing figure made him feel extremely at ease. The man held his little hand and walked on the empty and endless field. The blue sky was blue and white clouds were white, and the sun was shining brightly. "Daddy," he could not help but call out emotionally. Gu Jinglian closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. He heard a whisper like a mosquito. Even though it was a little slurred, he could still recognize that the little guy seemed to be calling someone's name. He opened his eyes and looked at him suspiciously. He bent down to listen, but Xiao Bao did not move anymore. "President Gu, we're here," the chauffeur said. Gu Jinglian looked up and saw that they had already arrived at the police station. The car stopped steadily at the entrance of the police station. The bodyguard immediately got out of the car and opened the door of the back seat. He saw Xiao Bao lying in Gu Jinglian's arms, sleeping peacefully. "President Gu, shall I carry him in?" Gu Jinglian looked down at the little guy. The little guy's expression was tranquil, and the corners of his lips were curled up as if he was smiling. Was he having a good dream? Seeing that he did not say anything, the bodyguard thought that he had acquiesced. He reached out to carry Xiao Bao. Just as her hand was about to reach out, Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Wait." His voice was not loud, but it was very deep, and it had a deterrent force that made people unable to look at him directly. The bodyguard looked puzzled, but he heard him say, "Can't you see that he's asleep?" The bodyguard was at a loss. She fell asleep, and then what happened? Didn't he say that he wanted to send the child to the police station? "President Gu, then, do you still want to carry him inside? He carefully probed and asked for his opinion. Gu Jinglian looked deeply at Xiao Bao and said, let him sleep. It was just a few words, but it was somewhat unexpected. The bodyguard was flustered. Then, tonight, where should we settle him? Gu Mansion. Yes. The bodyguard returned to his seat. Gu Jinglian came back to his senses and realized what he had just said. He was also a little shocked. If it were in the past, no matter what the reason was, he would mercilessly kick the kid out of the car even if he was asleep at the police station. However, when he looked at the kid's peaceful sleeping face just now, he actually could not bear to disturb him. What the hell? He did not expect that the only exception he would make was for a child. When Song Enya returned home in the morning, she found out from Jiang Qimeng that Song Jianjun's men had returned empty-handed because Mu Yanqing's men had taken Meng Qingxue away first, so they did not have a chance to make a move. When she heard the bad news, her body became slightly unsteady and her heart was in a mess. Chapter 27-22. How did this happen? Song Enya was shocked and furious. She grabbed her mother's shoulder and asked, does this mean that Mu Yanqing is in Yen City now? Yes. Jiang Qimeng nodded. He hasn't returned to the capital yet. According to the news, something happened to Meng Qingxue and she was sent to the hospital. The hospital? Song Enya was slightly shocked. Then, her lips curled into a strange smile. Could she have had a miscarriage? We don't know about that. Let's hope that's the case. In any case, the child in her stomach can't be kept. Song Enya was slightly stunned and asked uneasily, what if it's not a miscarriage? Since Mu Yanqing has found her, he'll bring her back. If that happens, we'll be in trouble. Indeed. If Mu Yanqing brings that B*TCH back, it'll be a very troublesome matter. What should we do, then? Song Enya was completely flustered. She could not help but resent those two men for being so useless and stupid. In the evening, when Song Zhenghua returned home, Song Enya immediately asked for his opinion. Dad! How should we get rid of that little vixen Meng Qingxue? Uncle's men were a step too late. Mu Yanqing has already taken Meng Qingxue away. He was probably the only one in the Song family who was clear-headed and rational right now. Song Zhenghua did not answer her directly. Instead, he asked sternly, where exactly did you go when you left the house in a hurry this morning? Yes. Jiang Qimeng also thought of this problem. I called you for breakfast this morning, but there was no one in the room. Where did you go so early in the morning? When Song Enya heard this, she stammered, seemingly deliberately avoiding the topic. Song Zhenghua slammed the table and rebuked angrily, are you still trying to hide things from us at this point? Or did you do something ridiculous behind our backs again? No, Dad. Song Enya had no choice but to reveal everything that had happened this morning and her original plan. When Song Zhenghua heard this, he was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. He felt that it was unreasonable and said in exasperation, how dare you do such a thing? Song Enya found it hard to accept his uncontrollable anger. She said indignantly, what else can I do? As matters stand, this is the only way I can think of. As long as the child in her womb exists, it will be the greatest threat to me. Song Zhenghua scolded, but you can't do that. What if Mu Yanqing finds out? So what if he finds out? Despite her stubbornness, she could not help feeling a little guilty. What you're doing will only make Mu Yanqing hate you more. The relationship between the two of you is like an abyss of suffering. If he knows that you have such a vicious method, he will definitely guard against you in the future. I think your cultivation is still too shallow. Once someone like you marries into a tiger's den like the Mu family, you will definitely be plotted against. Even though the Mu clan's momentum was in decline, everyone in the Mu clan had profound skills. You can't win. What can I do, then? Song Enya said aggrievedly, we can't just keep that child, can we?